Hey, I'm Meredith Anderson, 28 years old, doing great in the marketing world. But my family life? That's a whole different story. Let me take you back to where it all began 20 years ago. My mom, Linda, was about to give birth to my little sister, Sophie. Everything was fine, until it wasn't. Mom's heart stopped suddenly, and my dad, Robert, had to make an impossible choice. Save my mom or save the baby. He chose to save Mom. Sophie survived, but her brain was damaged. Meredith, honey, can you help Sophie with lunch? Mom's voice snaps me back to the present. I look at Sophie, now 20, but mentally still like a toddler. Sure, Mom, I reply, trying not to sound frustrated. Dad walks in, looking guilty as always. How's my girl doing today? He asks Sophie, not really expecting her to answer. She's fine, Robert, Mom says sharply. The tension in the room is thick. Dad leaves to bury himself in work like usual. I'm heading out, I say, grabbing my keys. But it's family dinner night, Mom protests. I've got a big presentation tomorrow, I explain. Mom looks disappointed but nods. As I walk out, I hear Sophie trying to say my name. It breaks my heart every time. The next day at work, I'm on fire. My boss, Mr. Thompson, is impressed with my presentation. Anderson, you've outdone yourself, he says, smiling. Keep this up, and that corner office might be yours soon. I feel proud. This is what I've been working for, to prove that despite my difficult family situation, I can still succeed. Later, I'm having coffee with my best friend Jess. You look exhausted, she says. I sigh. Just the usual family drama. What if Sophie? I start but stop myself. If Sophie what? Jess asks. Nothing. I shake my head. I feel guilty even thinking about it. You can't keep bottling this up, Jess says kindly. Have you thought about therapy? I scoff and say what? That I resent my sister for existing. I'm not a monster. That's not what I meant, Jess says firmly. I know she's right, but I'm not ready to face all of that. Instead, I focus on work, building a life away from the chaos at home. As I drive home that night, I wonder, how long can I keep running from my past? How long before it catches up with me? Little did I know, the real storm was about to hit, and it would change everything. When I was 13, my world fell apart. It was a hot summer evening, and I was heading to the kitchen for a snack when I heard them, Mom and Dad, arguing loudly from their bedroom. How long, Robert? How long has this been going on? Mom's voice was filled with anger. Linda, please, it's not what you think, Dad tried to explain. Not what I think. I found the text. Robert, you've been sleeping with your secretary. My heart raced. I pressed myself against the wall, frozen in shock. It started before Sophie was born. I was weak, Dad admitted. Before Sophie? You mean when I was pregnant? When our daughter almost died? Mom's voice was full of hurt. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad had cheated while Mom was pregnant with Sophie. I ended it, Linda. I swear, Dad said desperately. Liar. There are messages from just last week. Mom shot back. I must have made a noise because suddenly the argument stopped. The door opened and Dad stood there, pale as he saw me. Meredith, honey. I didn't let him finish. I ran out of the house, down the street, not stopping until I reached the park. I collapsed onto a swing, sobbing. Hours later, Dad found me. Meredith, we need to talk, he said gently. How could you? I shouted. How could you do this to Mom? To us? Dad sighed heavily. I made a terrible mistake, but your mother and we're working through it for the family. For Sophie, can you please keep this between us? I wanted to scream and tell Mom everything, but the thought of our family falling apart was too much. So I nodded, even though it broke my heart. The next few years were a blur. I threw myself into my studies, doing anything to avoid being home. The weight of Dad's secret crushed me, especially when I looked at Mom. My only escape was Miss Patterson, my guidance counselor. She noticed how withdrawn I was and how intensely I focused on school. Meredith, is everything okay at home? She asked one day. I almost broke down but couldn't betray my family. Just stressed about college applications, I lied. Miss Patterson didn't seem to believe me, but she didn't push. Instead, she became my mentor and helped me channel my pain into ambition. Before I knew it, graduation day arrived. As valedictorian, I stood at the podium, looking out at my classmates. Life doesn't always go as planned, I began. Sometimes we face challenges that seem impossible. But in those moments, we find our true strength. I saw Mom dabbing at her eyes, Dad looking proud but still guilty, and Sophie in her wheelchair, clapping excitedly even though she didn't understand why. Perseverance isn't just about pushing through hard times, it's about finding hope in the darkest moments and believing in yourself. When no one else does, I said, my voice cracking slightly, but I continued. We've all faced obstacles, some visible, some hidden, but we're here today because we refuse to let those obstacles define us. As I finished my speech to loud applause, I locked eyes with Miss Patterson. She nodded with a knowing look. I had made it this far, carrying the weight of my family's secrets, but as I stepped off the stage, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of my journey. Fast forward 10 years, and I'm still carrying the weight of those family secrets. On the outside, my life looks perfect. Corner office, fancy title, everything I worked for. But my personal life, it's a mess. Meredith, we've been dating for a year. Don't you think it's time I met your family? Tom asks over dinner. I nearly choke on my wine. It's complicated, Tom. My sister. She needs a lot of care, and I trail off. And you've used that excuse every time, he says, sighing. What aren't you telling me? If only he knew. But how do you explain to the man you love that your family is a ticking time bomb? The next day, my mom calls, sounding frantic. Meredith, Sophie's care facility is raising their rates. We can't afford it. I rub my temples, feeling a headache coming on. How much, Mom? When she tells me the amount, my stomach drops. It's more than I can comfortably afford, but what choice do I have? I'll figure something out, I promise. But that's just the start. A week later, Mom shows up at my apartment, tears streaming down her face. I found emails, she sobs. Robert's affair, it wasn't just a fling. It went on for years, Meredith. Years. The guilt of keeping Dad's secret for so long overwhelms me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. Her eyes widen in shock. You knew? Before I can explain, my phone rings. It's Dad. Meredith, I need your help. The company's being sued. They're saying I falsified reports, but it's not true. You have to believe me. But I don't. Not anymore. Overwhelmed, I reach out to the one person who's always been there for me, Miss Patterson. During our coffee meetup, I confess, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm betraying someone no matter what. Miss Patterson listens patiently, then leans forward. Meredith, you're not responsible for your father's actions. But you do have a choice in how you respond to them. Together, we come up with a plan. We'll anonymously tip off the authorities about Dad's business practices. It's not much, but it's a start. Just when I think things can't get any worse, Tom calls. You won't believe who I just saw at the school. A woman named Jessica was asking about you, Tom said over the phone. She said she knew your father. My blood ran cold. Jessica, Dad's former secretary. What was she doing back in town? I rushed to confront Dad, only to overhear him on the phone. Jessica, please, you can't do this. I'll lose everything, he begged. Then leave Linda. Jessica's voice crackled through the speaker, or I'll tell her everything. Dad's face fell. I need time, just give me a few days. As he hung up, he saw me standing in the doorway. The look of desperation in his eyes told me everything. Dad, what have you done? I asked. He broke down, confessing to a web of lies and financial wrongdoing that made my head spin. The father I thought I knew was a stranger to me. As I walked out of his office, I made a decision. It was time to stop protecting him. The truth had to come out. Little did I know, the storm that was about to hit would change everything. The day it all fell apart started like any other. I was at work when my phone exploded with notifications. Dad's company was under investigation by the SEC. My stomach churned, knowing what was coming. I rushed home to chaos. Mom was screaming at Dad, years of anger finally pouring out. You ruined our family. You chose your mistress over us, she shouted. Linda, please, I can explain, Dad tried. Sophie's caregiver, Maria, tried to step in. Please, Mr. Anderson, you're scaring Sophie. Stay out of this, Dad snapped, raising his hand. Maria flinched. That was the last straw. Maria reported Dad for verbal abuse, and everything began to unravel. Within weeks, Dad was forced to resign from his company. The scandal hit the local news, and then came the final blow. Jessica, realizing her benefits were gone, went public with the affair. Mom filed for divorce faster than I could blink. Through it all, I felt torn. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt guilty. Had I caused all of this by tipping off Miss Patterson? I finally broke down and told Tom everything. Mar, you did the right thing, he reassured me, holding me close. Your dad made his own choices. You're not responsible for his actions. His words were a comfort, easing the guilt I had carried. A year later, we were having a family dinner. Mom, Sophie, Tom, and me. The atmosphere was lighter. Mom was glowing. The support group is amazing, she said. I'm helping other parents navigate the challenges we face with Sophie. I smiled, watching Sophie happily munching on her favorite snack. She was thriving in her new care facility. Everything finally felt like it was falling into place. I have some news, I began. I have some news, I announced. Tom squeezed my hand, giving me encouragement. We're engaged. Mom's squeal of delight was deafening, and even Sophie clapped, sensing the excitement. Oh, and I got that promotion at work, I added as an afterthought. As we celebrated, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. Meredith, please, can we talk? I want to make things right. I stepped outside to take the call. Dad, I'm glad you're getting help, but I can't just forget everything that happened. I understand. I miss you, Pumpkin, he said, using my old nickname, which brought a lump to my throat. I hope you find peace, Dad, but right now, I need to focus on healing and on the family that's always been there for me. I ended the call, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Back inside, Mom was telling a story, gesturing excitedly while Sophie giggled, a sound so pure that it brought tears to my eyes. Tom looked at me with love and understanding. For the first time in years, I felt hope. We'd been through so much, but we had come out stronger. As I joined in the laughter, I realized this is what family should feel like. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still challenges and wounds to heal. But looking at the faces around the table, I knew we'd face them together. And that was enough. Now, to answer your question, if I were in Meredith's shoes, it would be difficult to decide whether to expose my father's misdeeds earlier or keep them secret to protect the family. The decision between loyalty and justice is never easy. Sometimes protecting family means confronting the truth, even if it causes pain. In the long run, honesty may be the only path to healing. What do you think is the right choice? Would you expose the truth or keep it hidden for the sake of family?
So my 29-year-old husband, Nine, passed away in a work accident in February. He drowned after falling off a boat. It was a freak accident, and the company's one and only fatality in their decades-long history. We have a 2-year-old son together, and as you can imagine, I am reeling. He basically left for work on a normal Friday night and never made it back. His mother has always disliked me from the moment she knew about my existence. All these years he did his best to protect me from the insanity, and in the past year it seemed as if mother-in-law had finally come around and wanted to make amends, because DH was still hopeful that his mother could change, and he wanted my son to have a relationship with his grandma. I agreed on VVLC, even though I didn't feel good about it. Well, after he passed, I had the unenviable yet necessary task of going through his stuff. I couldn't help but look through his conversation with mother-in-law. You guys, I knew this woman was off the rails, but I was left shaking after reading their conversation. All these years, she had been wishing ill upon me and my parents. She'd regularly accuse me of trying to divorce her and DH. On multiple occasions, she said that she prayed to God that he will take away someone that I loved the same way I took away DH from her. She told DH that karma will come for my son. She accused me and my parents of being gold diggers. For the record, my parents paid for our wedding and dear husband funeral because that's just how much they loved him. My poor husband did a wonderful job of defending us and shutting her down, and there were many instances where he would cut her off mid-rant by blocking her. In the past year, the vitriol did ease up considerably, though there were still many instances of it. Despite her and her family's terrible relationship with DH and me, I made sure that the whole lot of them had priority and sufficient access to DH at his funeral. I know I didn't have to extend the courtesy to them, but I've also buried a child, and I was willing to put aside our differences for a couple of hours so they could say their goodbyes proper. Turns out I shouldn't have cause. They supposedly weren't happy with how the funeral went. Pretty rich coming from people who said they wanted to foot the bill for the funeral, but never ponied up. And don't get me started on the inheritance. DH didn't leave a will, and that's another wild ride on its own. My rant is getting all over the place now, but more than anything, I just need to get this off my chest. This woman is evil. I feel sorry for my DH. He didn't deserve a mother like this, and he tried so hard to work things out with her up to his death. Some days I feel like telling her that she got what she wished for. God did take away someone I love. Her son. Talk about sinking the ship to kill the captain. I miss my dear husband terribly. I wish he had a much better mother in his short life. Update. First off, I really want to thank everyone for your support in my last post. I honestly didn't think it would get much attention, and I truly appreciate every single response. Some time has passed, and some matters have been taken care of. I received a couple of calls from mother-in-law via father-in-law phone, and they were odd. There was some hostility, some sympathy pandering, and a whole lot of question marks and odd requests. I kept each conversation brief and civil. As expected, mother-in-law did try to make a play for my house, but the law states clearly that I'm the sole legal owner, so no dice for her. Interestingly, the calls have stopped since the inheritance have been distributed. I'm hoping this is it, and I'll be left alone, though I'm pretty sure I will receive another one at some point. None of the calls were to ask about my son's daily needs. Strangers have come forward with milk, diapers, and food, yet there's been radio silence on my late husband's family's part. Mother-in-law did ask me to bring my son to see her, but each time I told her she's more than welcome to see her grandson at my parents' house. I don't get a response after. Lol, to me, this is a clear indication of their disinterest in my son. Not that it matters to me. I've got a wonderful support system, and my son doesn't need to be surrounded by such toxicity either. Just thought I'd hit you all with this little update since I did see a number of you followed me. I hope there's nothing interesting to follow up with, but if there is, you'll be informed. Here's to a lifetime of grieving peacefully and happiness, whatever that means anymore. Story 2. My mother-in-law set up a situation to suffocate our 2-month-old and make it look like an accident. Long story short is mother-in-law came for a 2-week visit to see her first grandchild. She's a very erratic and negative person with a huge don't tell me what to do mindset. Over the first week, she was acting how she typically has been in the past, but during the second part of the visit, things escalated and she became increasingly weird. She kept insisting on taking our baby to her room to sleep. We had multiple conversations with her about safe sleeping and specifically said no pillows since it's dangerous. Only put the baby to sleep in the bassinet. She seemed to not want to listen, so we decided she can't have the baby at night. It's a tempting offer to have a full night's sleep, as we're sleep-deprived new parents. She took the baby out of my arms as he was screaming from gas pains at around 11 p.m. last Saturday and said she'll get him calmed down. At this point, she has taken him out of the living room to her room and back once he's asleep, and in process multiple times with no issue. I can hear him crying for about 10-15 minutes after she left the room, but after another 10-15 minutes of silence, she wasn't back. So my husband and I went to check on the baby. Baby was placed on a fluffy pillow against the wall, and she was sleeping next to him. I think she was fake sleeping. We immediately snapped him up and didn't let her touch him for the rest of the duration of her stay. We told her not once, not twice, but 3 separate times that this can suffocate him, and she literally put him in the most unsafe way possible on the bed. This was not a careless mistake. She knew what she was doing. 10 minutes after we got the baby back, she came in the living room pretending to mess with a cup on the table, brushed her teeth, and then went to bed without saying anything. Normally, she's really chatty. We think she was trying to bait a fight out of us, so we decided to gray rock her while keeping the baby in our sight at all times. She was relatively silent the rest of the trip, 3 days, and literally looked like she wanted to kill us near the end. I've never felt this from anyone before, and it was terrifying. The kicker is that she was using my husband's iPad alone in her room for a few hours before she left, and it seems she was looking up murder stories and true crime videos. It's just so creepy. In retrospect, there's a ton of small things that she did and said that makes it seem that she was thinking about harming the baby for at least a day or 2 before this happened. I feel sick about the whole thing. Before this incident, she was doing things to bait fights from us and was talking shit about my husband while he was gone, thinking that would drive a wedge between us. She had an agenda. She wants him to move back in with her and punish us for not giving her money, and would literally harm a baby, her own flesh and blood, to do so. There's a lot of details and events that lead up to the incident, but it feels way too much to write up. She's definitely mentally ill. She was frantically ranting at me for hours a day about money and how everyone treats her poorly, etc. before the incident, and probably has a personality disorder. Other members of her family have cut ties with her over her behavior. We are never talking to her again. Luckily, we live in a different country far away, and there's no way she could randomly drop by. I've never experienced anything remotely like this before in my life with anyone. This is the first time I've seen her in 2 years, and the last time I'll ever see her. Story 3. My mother-in-law photoshopped my husband's nose on our wedding pictures. How do I tell him? I 27 female, I've been with my husband 29 male for 7 years. I remember that early in our relationship, one of the first things he expressed insecurity about was his nose, specifically about its width. He never wanted surgery, but thinks his nose is too big for his face. I never thought that true, and for a long time, I wondered where he'd gotten that idea from. Then I met his mother, and all my doubts went out the window. I don't hate her, but the woman complains about everything, and she seems particularly interested in criticizing her sons. Barely anything about my husband or his older brother is good enough for her, and if it is, she is quick to imply they don't deserve it. According to my bill, that behavior didn't start until file passed about 8 years ago, so they don't usually hold it against her. But to me, it seems like she legitimately doesn't want her children to be happy. Most times we talk to her, my husband ends up devastated. She constantly complains about me, his job, our apartment, and his appearance. She has, on more than one occasion, suggested he get a nose job. That tends to upset him, so I always try to shut that down as quickly as possible. We got married in early May. The photos were ready about 2 months later, and we created a shared album on Google Photos for our friends and family, including mother-in-law. I got pregnant during our honeymoon. Can't recommend Dubrovnik enough. And I'm now 24 weeks along. We've had problems with mother-in-law concerning my pregnancy. We're having a boy, and she had a breakdown because she wanted a girl that forced us to put her on an info diet. That was 2 months ago, and she has since improved her behavior. Because of that, We said yes when she invited us to go to a mall near her place to shop for baby clothes last Saturday. My husband had an emergency at work and ended up not coming, but we still managed to have a good time. When we were done, she invited me back to her place. I hadn't been there in a while, and I quickly saw that she'd gotten some of our wedding pictures up on the wall. I instantly noticed something was wrong with them, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was yet. A mother-in-law saw what I was looking at and proudly announced that she'd gotten someone to fix his nose. In other words, she gave her son a Photoshop nose job on his wedding pictures. I couldn't believe it. I never thought she'd stoop so low. It wasn't even a good nose job. It was so bad that my husband's face didn't look real. He looked like a Ken doll, and not in the hot Ryan Gosling way. Mother-in-law must have seen how mad I got because she instantly tried to defend herself. She tried to make the point that her son deserved to look his best on his wedding day, and I should have convinced him to get the real nose job before our ceremony. I made up an excuse to leave, but I could tell she knew the real reason. She's been calling and texting me almost every day since. I've been ignoring her, but she's always either apologizing, accusing me of overreacting, or begging me not to tell my husband. I know it seems trivial, but I'm outraged. And the more I think about it, the more disgusted I get. I could never imagine doing something like that to my child. I haven't told my husband yet, mostly because we've both been busy with work this week, but also because I have no idea how to. His mother was finally starting to be a better person around him and his brother, and I know it will break his heart to find out about this. I don't know what to do. I have to tell him, but I can't figure out how. I know he loves his mother, and I don't want to damage whatever relationship they still have. Mother-in-law also mentioned she intended to send the improved pictures to some of her relatives. So I have to find a way to shut that down. So how can I tell my husband his mother photoshopped his face on our wedding pictures? More importantly, what would be the most peaceful way to do it?
I, 26 male, and my girlfriend, 27 female. We met each other in college when we were in the same calculus class. She was really smart, and I took the chance to ask her for help with some of our coursework. I was studying engineering and knew math better than she did. We flirted a bunch and ended up dating. We stayed together throughout our entire 4 years of undergrad. Later on, we both went to grad schools in the city, and even though we attended different schools, we lived together. I couldn't imagine my life without her. We had been together for a long time, and I saw a lot of my future with her. I wanted to propose, but I decided to wait until both of us were settled in our careers and really ready for that next big step. Her family lived in Texas, and we were in New York, so she didn't get to see them much. I met them a few times, but we weren't very close. She had a strong bond with her family and talked to them regularly. Although she missed them a lot, she was content living in the city. Then one evening, we received a surprise phone call from her mother. Her sister had a car accident and was in the ICU. As soon as she heard, she packed a bag and booked the next available flight to be with her. I wanted to go along, but we decided it would be better for me to stay behind for a day. This way, she could inform her workplace and arrange for someone to take care of our dog. I stayed back to handle things while she went ahead. During her flight home, her mother called me and delivered the devastating news that her sister had passed away. It broke my heart that I couldn't be there with her when she learned about the loss of one of her closest friends. They were so alike that people called them twins. My girlfriend was 2 years younger than her sister, but they looked so much alike. When my girlfriend arrived in Texas, people were struck by how identical they looked, and their voices sounded exactly the same. Her trip changed from visiting her injured sister to helping plan a funeral. I stayed in New York longer than planned at her suggestion. She wanted me to wait until they had a date set for the funeral. We couldn't afford much for dog boarding or a sitter, so the shorter my time away, the better. I called her frequently to check in while she was in Texas. As time passed, it seemed like she was coping better. There were times she didn't answer, but she'd text me back later, explaining she had been at her sister's house sorting through her things. Her sister, married to a guy we called Joe, seemed nice in the few times I met him, but he came across as superficial. He aimed for a big house, nice cars, and a perfect wife, and that's what he got. I always felt he wanted to marry my wife's sister because she fit the image of a trophy wife. I knew spending time at her sister's house meant being around him, but she was grieving. It never occurred to me that they might become involved romantically. Eventually, I flew down for the funeral and was finally reunited with my girlfriend. I missed my girlfriend a lot, and I felt guilty for not being there with her during her grieving process. At the wake, Joe struck up a conversation with me and mentioned how sometimes he saw her sister in my girlfriend. His gaze lingered on her longer than I found comfortable, but I didn't say anything considering he had just lost his wife. After the funeral, he kept bringing up how tough it was on my girlfriend and emphasized that I wasn't there. It felt like he was trying to make me feel guilty. A couple of days later, my girlfriend and I flew back to the city and tried to get things back to normal. However, she was still grieving, and many things upset her. I tried to be there for her, but she wouldn't let me help. When I attempted to comfort her or hold her at night, she turned away and didn't even want to hold my hand. I thought it was just her way of grieving and shutting me out because of it. One day, I came home from work and found her in our bedroom, trying on clothes she brought back from Texas. It turned out they were all her sister's belongings, things that Joe had purchased for her before she passed away. I noticed she was taking a lot of pictures of the clothes too. A few weeks later, she informed me that Joe was coming to visit and would be staying with us. He needed to leave their house, and since he'd never been to New York, she invited him. I felt guilty for being upset about it, but I was still bothered by how he looked at her during his wife's wake. What added to my frustration was that nobody consulted me to see if it was okay. I kept quiet about it because it was such a sensitive matter. My girlfriend was in frequent contact with him leading up to his visit. I would come home from work and see them FaceTiming, discussing various places they planned to go. When he arrived, the calls and texts became even more frequent. This level of communication wasn't there before the funeral, and it made me uneasy. I didn't know how to address the situation or what to say about it. I realized that no matter what I said, I might come off as insensitive because both of them were still grieving. Joe finally arrived in the city, and my girlfriend and I assisted him in settling into our apartment. Since my girlfriend worked from home, and I worked just a few blocks away, she was going to be alone with him most of the time he was there. Mike was telling me not to trust it. I hadn't seen any direct signs that something was going on between them. Still, I had this gut feeling that their relationship had changed significantly since the funeral, and it bothered me. My imagination started running wild, thinking about the conversations they might have had over text or when I wasn't around. My girlfriend looked exactly like her sister, and I couldn't shake the worry that Joe might be attracted to her, maybe even always had been. One afternoon while I was at work, I sent my girlfriend a text asking if she wanted me to grab food on my way home. Normally, she'd reply within half an hour, even if she was in a meeting. However, this time, she didn't respond at all. I started to get a bit worried, so I left work a couple of hours early to go home and make sure everything was all right. As I approached the door, I heard some very alarming noises on the other side. It was evident that someone was having intimate relations in the apartment. As quietly as possible, I inserted my key into the door and opened it, only to find my girlfriend wearing one of her sister's dresses, engaged in an intimate moment on the couch with Joe. They noticed me, and she swiftly got off him, hurriedly fixing herself before following me down the hallway. As soon as I witnessed it, I was done with her. My suspicions were confirmed, and I didn't need to say anything before I walked away to catch the elevator. She slipped through the door and began attempting to explain herself. I didn't want to hear her out, but I felt trapped and had no choice. She told me that Joe was there for her during her grieving, and it just happened the first time. She swore she didn't expect it to happen again while he was visiting. They talked about it, both acknowledging it was wrong, but it just happened again. I could sense she was lying, so I asked to see her phone. She seemed almost shocked that I asked. It was clear she wasn't expecting me to challenge her on it. When I checked her phone and found the text messages between them, it confirmed that she was indeed lying. She apologized as I read through all the messages, but deep down, I knew that it wouldn't make a difference. Before her sister's funeral, my girlfriend and Joe got together. She was at their house helping him find a dress for her sister's funeral, and she tried it on to see how it looked because they looked similar. She told me that Joe saw her, and something changed in his mind because she resembled his wife so much. They had sex for the first time while she was trying on dresses for her sister's burial. After that, they developed a very strange bond where he practically pretended that my girlfriend was his deceased wife. It was seriously messed up, and the more she explained, the more disturbed I became. By the time we got off the elevator, Joe was catching up to us in the lobby of the apartment complex. It took everything in me not to run and attack him. I restrained myself and told my girlfriend I never wanted to see her again. I strongly recommended they both go to therapy because what they did was beyond troubling. I went to a friend's house to figure out what to do about where I lived. I didn't want to stay in the apartment where I saw all that happen. While thinking about it, I knew I wanted to expose them. They weren't going to make a fool out of me and act like nothing happened. I felt enough time had passed since her sister's death to tell everyone how the two closest people in her life betrayed her after she died. I created a group chat with almost her entire family, excluding her and Joe. I composed a message explaining everything my girlfriend had told me. They were furious when they heard, and many of them didn't even believe what I said. I had people calling me, shouting, accusing me of lying and making up terrible things. I swore to them that it was the truth. While all this was happening, my girlfriend bombarded my phone with calls and texts, asking if I had spilled the beans to her family about her and Joe. Seeing that I had accomplished what I wanted, I blocked all of them. After that, it wasn't my problem anymore. A few days later, I returned to my apartment to gather my things, and I noticed Joe was still there. He looked like he wanted to harm me and yelled about how he couldn't even go back to his place without fearing that my girlfriend's family would retaliate against him. I didn't care. I just packed my things and left. Since then, I haven't spoken to my girlfriend or any of her family members. I moved into a new apartment and started my life over. I feel like I wasted a lot of time being with the wrong person, and now I have to begin again. Reaction: I can't believe you had to go through that tough situation. It seems like you were really patient with your girlfriend because of her sadness. You had a feeling something was wrong but tried to give her the space she needed. I always believe you should listen to your gut when it says something's not right. In this case, your gut feeling was correct. I don't get how your girlfriend was okay with acting like her sister with her husband. The way they act is strange, and they both need a lot of counseling to deal with their problems. What they did was not right and really unhealthy. Your girlfriend's family should know about it, especially considering it would have upset your girlfriend's sister. The fact that they got sympathy and apologies for their loss while betraying her is sad. I know you gave a lot to that relationship, but I hope you can move on and find someone who is loyal. I wish you the best moving forward.
I, 22 female, need some serious advice on how to navigate any of this. I found out a week ago that basically my entire family has been helping my fiancé male 23 hide his affair with my best friend 23 female. I created this account because I honestly have no one else to tell this to honestly. So my brain figured internet strangers would be best. None of my family and friends have read it, thank the stars. For extra emotional context, me and my fiancé have been together since 8th grade, on and off until 2020. I do apologize if this gets long, but it's so much to unpack and I just want to refresh myself with everything I have, as well as figure out the best way to confront my family, best friend, and fiancé with at least some dignity. Here are names and ages for context for everyone involved. Richard equals half-brother, 26. Maria equals half-sister, 27. Angie equals my mom, 56. Peach equals best friend, soon to be ex-best friend. Alex equals my fiancé, soon to be ex. So, a week ago, Alex was taking a shower and had left his phone on our bed. Me and my fiancé have an open phone policy, seeing as we both struggled with getting cheated on in past relationships. Go figure, seeing my situation. I was packing my suitcase for a family trip that is happening after my rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I heard his phone keep going off. He yelled from our shower if I could mute his phone. I went to get his phone and saw that it was Peach calling him. I was curious at first, but seeing as she's part of my bridal party, I didn't find it too suspicious. I muted the phone and soon messaged Peach from my own phone. Here is the paraphrase of our conversation. Me, hey Peach. My fiancé is in the shower and what did you need? Peach, oh nothing. Lol, just wanted to confirm with him the flowers for your bouquet and aisle. Me, that's weird. I didn't change my mind on any flowers or anything. The florist was contacted last month and everything was paid for already by Tony. Tony is my mom's husband. Peach, are you sure? I remember him telling me you changed your mind. After that, it was the usual wedding talk after that point. In hindsight, I should have found it very weird that she would call him about 6 times to confirm a flower choice when she simply could have either texted me or Alex. When Alex got out the shower, I told him Peach tried calling him about my flower choices. I asked him what made him think I changed my mind on the flowers for the wedding. He paused for a bit. I now know he was basically stalling and doing the "oh, I'm thinking" face when I had asked. He then said that he thought I had mentioned it in passing during a dinner. I told him that I didn't recall that. He then just shrugged and grabbed his phone and went back in the bathroom. I hate to be one of those people, but for once, my gut actually sunk. I got this really paranoid feeling, and I couldn't shake it. I tried to convince myself that it was just my old cheating trauma trying to creep back. Yet, I just couldn't let this go. Me and Alex had dinner, and I pushed through all the way until it was time to go to bed. I pretended to fall asleep first. Me and Alex usually cuddle to fall asleep. When I knew he was in a deep enough sleep, I went to check his phone again. I checked his Instagram, Snapchat, and messages, and I couldn't find anything. I then went to his Facebook Messenger. He has Messenger to communicate with his family overseas. I only saw his main family, and most of the messages were about getting plane tickets to come to the wedding. We were supposed to get married in December with a winter wonderland-themed wedding. However, with my previous relationships, I checked his archives on Messenger. That's when the horrific truth came to light. There was a group chat with Peach, Alex, Richard, Angie, and Maria. The group chat was established a year ago, where basically Alex and Peach confessed to having an affair to my family. My mom did shame them at first. Yet, she later asked Alex did he truly loved Peach. Because you can't help who you love. Yeah, really great, Mom. That was super helpful. He said he was absolutely sure and that he also loved me too. TF. Then Maria and Richard offered that he, being Alex, bring up to me an open relationship. They both are in open relationships and married, and apparently is working for them in whatever la la land they live in. At this point, me and him were already engaged. Alex mentioned to them that it seemed too far deep to try to bring it up. Angie, my mom, even though at this point I hate to even call her that, said that they would cover for Alex and Peach until he felt strong enough to bring up an open relationship to me. As I was reading, all I could think was how in the actual could my family betray me like that? How could Peach betray me like that? We've been friends since kindergarten. We even grew up with Alex. How could she process in her mind of my fiancé and say that she loves him too? All of this in this disgusting group chat. For Alex to have the nerve to say he loves me as well? For him to know firsthand what it's like to be betrayed like this? I honestly wanted to vomit. However, I was just taking screenshot after screenshot. The more I read down, I found out that Peach took my spot on our previous family trip. I got a really bad stomach bug a while ago that caused me not to go. I can't even begin to imagine what they did on the trip. And the fact my mother was okay with all of this, I think, is what hurts the most. The fact she's known for a whole year that my fiancé was cheating on me. That's taking the longest to sit and I feel. There is more in the group chat, but these were the major points. I've known for a whole week. It's been eating at me inside, and I want to explode and cuss them all out. I want to ruin their lives the way they ruined me. It all hurts, Soph *king much, and I just really want advice on how to confront them. How do I even begin? What do I even say? The anger I feel is so intense that I feel like if I just let it all out, I would just look insane. Please Reddit, anything will help. I'm planning on confronting them tomorrow at our rehearsal dinner. Story 2. My wife passed away in a tragic accident. Then I found out she was cheating. 2 months ago, my wife of 10 years, I'm 35, she was 34, tragically passed away in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver in broad daylight. I cried nonstop for 3 days. We were planning on having kids, and I had started a good-paying job a year earlier, and we just purchased our first home just 2 months before her death. I just couldn't and still can't believe she is really gone from my life. It's like just yesterday, everything was heading in the right direction and would soon raise a family. She seemed happy in our marriage and stated how proud of me she was. The following week after the accident, I received her phone, which was locked. After a week, I found out how to unlock it by an obvious code I didn't think of earlier. I simply just wanted it to keep photos in her memory, photos of us, and so forth. But I saw some odd things in her photos. Included photos of her in someone else's house, a house which I had never seen before, taking provocative images. I continued scrolling down and seen the most heart-wrenching thing I ever seen, which was her with another man. It was nothing sexual, but they were in a place that was obviously his. And just how close they were, I just knew that this was an affair. The guy whom my wife had an affair with showed up at her funeral. I felt like I got stabbed in the gut when I realized I seen him there. I began reading her texts, and first I found out that she was on her way back from his place. 3 hours before the accident, she texted him saying, "I'm on my way." I knew that meant he was the last one to see my wife. Not only see her, but having an intimate moment with her. Also, she would still be here right now if she wasn't seeing him. I feel like I'm going through a death of a loved one and a breakup at the same time. She did this behind my back and will never know that I found out. In a way, I feel she got to escape the heartbreak she put me through. Although I fully understand death is much worse, and even knowing everything I know, I would never ever wish this or any pain upon her. I found out not only through her texts, but her Facebook messages. Something that absolutely enrages me is that she told her closest friend that this guy from work wanted to take her out to dinner. Her friend encouraged her to go out with him. It enrages me because I knew her as well, and in person she was always very nice. But my wife was asking her to get confirmation. Had she said, "No, you are married, do not go out with him," I honestly feel like she wouldn't have done it. But her best friend was like, "Oh, is he hot? Oh, do it. Go have fun, it's just fucking enraging." This happened 6 months ago when she asked her friend about it. A few days later, she talked to her friend about how after dinner she went to his place and had sex multiple times. When I read that, I honestly got physically sick. I honestly started going through a breakdown, vomiting in the toilet, then crying on the bathroom floor. I just can't imagine that this stuff actually happened, but it did. How could she do this? But as the days passed and the initial shock began to slow down, I started piecing things together. The funeral, I noticed something a little unusual, which was this best friend of hers talking to one of her coworkers. This was a friend from high school, and there was no reason she should have known any of her coworkers. But she was in fact talking to her coworker who she had the affair with. Then she came and talked to me, gave me a hug. The guy whom my wife was having an affair with came and shook my hand. Something about that just makes me feel sick. Like I was being humiliated in a moment of grief. There was him and her best friend who knew about her affair. I couldn't help but wonder, did her coworkers also know? It's been a month, and I feel no closer to breaking away from the heartbreak. I miss her. I want her to be alive. If she was, I would probably even want to fix our marriage. But she's not here anymore. I still couldn't bring myself to read all of her text messages with him. There is hundreds and some are sexually explicit. My blood boils and my heart aches when I open their texts, and I get hit with anxiety and an adrenaline rush. Palms get sweaty and hands shake. But I feel it's important I knew everything. It just breaks my heart this guy did things with my wife she wouldn't do for me. The thing that blows my mind the most is that there were no warning signs at all. Not fucking one. Our marriage was good. She never did anything suspicious. Our ex-life went on as normal. Just zero warning signs about it other than the fact she started wearing a little more makeup than usual. Then I blame myself for not catching on. Maybe this all could have been prevented. Maybe I should have done this or that. I am broken and don't see myself ever being happy again. Edit. Thanks everyone for all the support. I honestly didn't expect so much response. Everyone who wished me well, thank you, and know that your kind words give me strength. I have got a response back from her friend, stating that she is deeply sorry for encouraging the behavior and not taking my feelings into account. She never wanted me hurt, and yada yada. Honestly, I don't feel any relief from her apologies. About the phone, I cannot bring myself to destroy all the truth. I feel like I must read through the entirety of my wife's texts with this man, or I will forever go crazy wondering what did and didn't occur, how often, and maybe get some answers on if they were lovers. Was it just lust/sex, or what did she plan on doing? Obviously, in this state of trauma, I cannot emotionally handle reading their conversations, but I decided to keep the phone, to read it all, and then toss it and move on. Also for people telling me to piss on her grave, or saying this is karma, please drop it, and don't comment. I loved her for over a decade, and it's not going away like that. I still love this woman, even with the disgusting things she has done. She was still my wife, a daughter, and an aunt. She didn't deserve to get hit by some drunk driver and suffer with bleeding her brain that ultimately caused her death. Please go away. I do not need this, and I am not a sick-minded enough man to have those thoughts. Update. Hello all. I love everyone in this sub. You guys have shown me so much support regarding what I've been dealing with. I can't say anything has gotten better, especially during this epidemic where I'm stuck not working now. Just too much time. Anyway, people mentioned getting in touch with my wife's company's HR about her coworker whom she was having an affair with. He is single. I have done this and I asked about it, and they said there was no policy against coworkers getting romantically involved as long as it is off work. I kind of figured this was the case, as much as I want to get him fired and ruin his life. It was in fact consensual and their affair was off the clock, so I understand that there is nothing they can do. I didn't think there was. I sent a screenshot of the message of her friend encouraging her to her boyfriend on Facebook. He replied that he is sorry for what happened to me, but that she didn't think she would actually do it, that I shouldn't blame his GF for my wife's affair or death. So I guess it's dead end there as I'm talking to a doorknob who believes whatever his GF says. I got a ton of suggestions about posting her texts and messages to publicize what she did. I am not going to do this, and I really don't understand the point of doing it. She is gone and has no consequences left to suffer. No justice will be served. She is gone. I will only be making this more difficult for her family. Besides, it's not really anyone else's business, even if she was alive. So I decided to go through all her texts with him and her other friends. I was going to wait longer before looking, but I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't seem to move on from wondering how, where, why, and not having any answers. Her entire conversation with him was still there from their first and last texts. Little bit of good news is she expressed guilt, although not right away. about the affair, and after meeting him the second time for sex, she expressed guilt, and she told him that she can't continue seeing him. But of course, it would continue. Their conversations would range from her being very close to him, sending heart-filled messages, to next thing, totally ignoring him. But she would sometimes apologize for ignoring him, which obviously angered me. Bad news is she appears to have been much more sexually exploratory with him. She also smoked weed with him, which I never seen her do. I found he had anal sex with her, more than once. Yet it's something she never let me do. She also had him sleep in our bed on the night I went to visit my brother. Also, she gave him head while he drove to get lunch on their lunch break. She talked about it like it was funny. This isn't something I was ready for. I began shaking and puking. It gave me a severe anxiety attack, and I resorted to drinking last night, 'cause it was just too much. I feel like he took her from me, like he killed her because she would be alive if she didn't go to his place.
When I opened my eyes, soft morning light gently illuminated the room through the window. Our house in the quiet residential area of suburban San Francisco always greets such peaceful mornings. By the bedside, my husband David was quietly getting ready. He's always an early riser. "Good morning, Catherine." I smiled at his gentle voice and opened my eyes to find David already in his suit, tying his necktie in front of the mirror. Working as an engineer at a tech company, he maintains an early bird lifestyle. "Good morning. You're up early again today." I got up from bed and opened the curtains. Through the window, I could see neat rows of houses with well-maintained gardens. Every time I look at this neighborhood, I'm reassured that we made the right choice in choosing this place. My name is Catherine Miller, 38 years old. I work as a project manager at a major architectural firm. I'm known for my long blonde hair and what others often describe as my intellectual appearance. My dedicated work ethic and meticulous nature might have been shaped during my journey to this position. While preparing breakfast, I was mentally organizing today's schedule. Unlike me, who mainly works from home, David needs to head to the office early. When he sat at the table, I served his usual breakfast: toast, scrambled eggs, and black coffee. I might be a bit late tonight. Project deadlines coming up. I understand. I have online meetings all day too, so I'll keep dinner simple. This kind of casual conversation over breakfast is our daily routine. Married for 5 years, this lifestyle naturally fell into place. I have a twin sister, Lauren, who works as a freelance web designer. We look identical, and people always mistake us at first meeting. But our personalities are complete opposites. While I'm meticulous and organized, Lauren is free-spirited with an artistic sensibility. Still, we're close sisters who make sure to have dinner together several times a month. "Catherine, I'll have to cancel our weekend dinner plans. I have a meeting with a new client." That message from Lauren arrived last week. She's single and devoted to her work. Sometimes I worry about her lonely expression, but that's the path she chose. Maybe I shouldn't worry too much. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Margaret Miller, is fairly good too. Coming from a wealthy family, she can sometimes be overly strict, but she's also a warm person who values family. We never miss important gatherings like wedding anniversaries and birthdays. "Catherine, your cooking skills have really improved." Those words from my mother-in-law at last month's dinner party made me happy. Our relationship, which was initially tense, has now become peaceful. I met David at a party hosted by a mutual friend.
I was immediately drawn to his gentle nature and how he valued family. We married a year after meeting, and in our third year, we were blessed with our son Matthew. During the day, I immerse myself in work. From my home office, I manage architectural projects and conduct online meetings with my team. I usually have a quick lunch alone, but sometimes I share sandwiches in the garden with my neighbor Sarah. The kids' school has been keeping me busy lately. But Catherine, hearing about your work motivates me to keep going. Conversations with Sarah always warm my heart. She's a mother of two and actively involved in PTA activities. In the evenings, my husband and I enjoy quiet dinners together. Sometimes we share a glass of wine while talking about our day. Weekends are for gardening and reading, my hobbies. We also occasionally host home parties for nearby friends. The roses we planted the other day are growing nicely. Weekend gardening is my favorite time. I feel at peace touching the soil and watching the plants grow. David lost his first wife to illness 8 years ago. When I learned this, I hoped I could help heal his emotional wounds. Now, we've built a relationship where we understand and support each other. I'm so glad I met you. Sometimes David whispers these words to me. Each time, I feel our bond growing stronger. I believe these peaceful days would last forever. I never imagined that this life would change dramatically. That day was just like any other spring afternoon. May 15, 2014, a Thursday. I usually work from home, but that day I had unusually taken the afternoon off. I went to a shopping mall in suburban San Francisco to buy Matthew's kindergarten uniform. Mom, can I play in the kids' space after this? After choosing the uniform in the children's clothing section, Matthew asked with hopeful eyes. As a reward for always being good, I gladly gave permission. The kids' space was right near the store, with security cameras installed and staff always present. Just 30 minutes, okay? Mom will do some other shopping meanwhile. Matthew nodded happily and ran toward the kids' space. I never imagined that would be the last time I'd see my son's back. After finishing my shopping at a nearby stationery store, I returned before the promised 30 minutes were up and immediately noticed something was wrong. Matthew wasn't in the kids' space. Excuse me, have you seen a boy in a blue t-shirt? Even when I asked the staff, I didn't get a clear answer. My heart started racing. Trying to stay calm, I began searching the nearby stores one by one. Matthew. There was no response to my calls. As fear began to take over, I sought help from security guards. Soon, an announcement was made over the mall speakers, and multiple security guards began searching. We should contact the police right away. While nodding to the head of security's words, I was calling David with trembling hands. Though he was in a meeting, he rushed over immediately. We'll find him. Stay calm. David's voice was steady, but he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. The police arrived, and a full-scale search began. Security camera footage was reviewed, and witnesses were interviewed. However, no decisive leads were found. By that evening, it was on local news. The headline, 3-year-old missing from San Francisco suburban shopping mall, flashed across the screen. Days later, the search expanded across the state. Helicopters and drones were deployed in a large-scale search operation. The hashtag #FindMatthew spread on social media, with many people helping to provide information. However, as time passed, promising leads gradually diminished. 1 month passed, then 6 months, then a year. The police investigation reached a standstill. Isn't there anything we can do? Night after night, I asked David this question. We hired private investigators and continued our own search efforts. Every year on the anniversary of Matthew's disappearance, we held press conferences, continuing to call for information. Daily life changed dramatically. Days spent immersing myself in work to escape reality. Conversations between my husband and me gradually decreased. Still, David was always my support. He would silently hold my hand and cry with me. You should take a break. Every time my sister Lauren said this, I shook my head. Giving up felt like abandoning Matthew. I continued posting Matthew's photos on social media regularly, along with age progression images. Maybe someone will spot him. I couldn't let go of that slim hope. 10 years brought us a new life rhythm. Every morning, we set a plate for Matthew. On birthdays, we always prepare a cake. It might be a sad habit, but it became an important ritual for us. Catherine, you've been so strong. One day, my mother-in-law Margaret said this to me. It was a gentle voice, unusual for her strict nature. Days oscillating between hope and despair. Still, we had to keep moving forward. We made new friends and found different forms of happiness. But deep in our hearts, the scene from that day remained burned in our memories. Life changed gradually but surely. Weekend home parties decreased, replaced by volunteer work supporting families of missing children. Meeting other parents who shared similar experiences gave me a new purpose. Your activities are giving hope to many people. Jane, who leads the support group, told me this. She too was a mother who lost her daughter 15 years ago. By sharing our pain and supporting each other, we could slowly move forward. Still, the changing seasons were especially hard. Cherry blossom season, which Matthew loved. Passing by his former kindergarten would bring back memories of holding his tiny hand. Sometimes, I would see children on the street and imagine what Matthew might look like now. The monthly reports from private investigators always contained the same content. No new leads have been found. Still, waiting for these reports had become part of our lives. Looking back now, those 10 years felt both long and short. We can't get back the lost time. But no one imagined the truth would be revealed in such a way. That night was flowing quietly as usual. After 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed. David had messaged that he'd be late due to work, so I was relaxing alone in the living room. Outside the window, soft moonlight quietly illuminated the residential area. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment at the late-night visitor. Through the monitor, I could see 2 men in navy blue uniforms. Police officers. My heart started racing. A police visit at such a late hour, something must be wrong. May we have a moment of your time? Yes, what's the matter? As I opened the door, the older officer began speaking quietly. His expression didn't show any urgency, but my anxiety only grew. Do you know this boy? The photograph the officer held out showed a boy around 13. Glossy black hair, dignified eyebrows, and those eyes. Eyes I recognized, but now only existed in distant memories. My hands began to shake. This is my son, but he should have died 10 years ago. Words tumbled out in a trembling voice. The boy in the photo was undoubtedly Matthew. But that was impossible. My son disappeared 10 years ago. Just as I was trying to convince myself he was gone forever, this happened. He's alive. And he wants to meet you. The officer's words hit me with a sense of reality. My knees nearly gave out, but the younger officer quickly helped me to the sofa. What do you mean? To my confusion, the older officer began explaining the situation. In a small town in Montana, a new teacher had become suspicious. There were irregularities in transfer paperwork, and the woman claiming to be the boy's mother showed unusual behavior. As local police investigated the teacher's report, connections to this kidnapping case from 10 years ago emerged. The DNA test results are in. There's no mistake. I couldn't stop crying as I clutched the photo. I immediately contacted David, who interrupted his work and rushed home. The police arranged for us to meet our son at the police station at 9 a.m. the next morning. That night, neither David nor I could sleep. 10 years of emptiness. Our grown son. And why he was suddenly found. Though questions were endless, we were speechless at the fact that our son was alive. By morning, media had already begun gathering around the police station. This development in a 10-year-old kidnapping case was drawing much attention. When we were shown to the meeting room at the police station, my heart felt like it would burst. The door opened, and a boy entered. "Mom." At the sound of that voice, tears burst forth uncontrollably. There he was, my son. Though grown significantly, he still retained traces of his childhood face. But the anxious look in his eyes hadn't changed since he was 3. Matthew. I fought the urge to embrace him. 10 years had built an invisible wall between us. He must have his own confusion and turmoil. We need to approach this carefully, one step at a time. May I sit down? Matthew nodded slightly, and we sat facing each other across the table. David watched from a distance. It was his consideration to make this moment primarily for mother and child. How have you been? Perhaps it was a commonplace question. But I didn't know how to bridge this 10-year gap. Good. His voice was small and slightly shaking. I went to school every day. Those words squeezed my heart. School. My son's precious days. Time I couldn't watch over him. Who helped with his homework, who cheered at sports days, who cried at graduation ceremonies. The countless stolen memories stabbed at my heart. Your father would like to meet you too. I turned and looked at David. He slowly approached the table and sat in the chair next to Matthew. Hello, Matthew. David's voice was shaking too. Our son stared at his father's face and smiled faintly. His expression looked as if he was trying to recall something from a distant memory. I remember, from photos. The same face Mom showed me. At those words, David and I exchanged glances. Someone had been showing our son our photos. There must be some great mystery hidden there. But now wasn't the time to pursue that truth. Matthew, I'm so happy to see you. I tried my best to smile. But my voice wouldn't come out properly. Tears kept rolling down my cheeks. I'm sorry. Matthew suddenly whispered. I couldn't escape. Because. It's okay. I immediately interrupted. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. The meeting time was 30 minutes. Far too short. But this was just the beginning. From now on, we would have to slowly reclaim our lost time. The police, considering Matthew's psychological care, proposed a gradual reunion program. Daily meetings at set times. And building relationships gradually while receiving counseling from specialists. It might require patience. But for us who had waited 10 years, even this time felt precious. As we left the meeting room, Matthew said in a small voice, "Can we meet again?" Of course. I promise. This time, I was certain I could keep that promise. Leaving the police station, camera flashes from waiting media went off. But even that commotion felt like events from a distant world to me now. I was just filled with joy at this miraculous reunion and anticipation for the new life about to begin. In the car heading home, David quietly said, "We can start again. As a family." I silently nodded. Indeed, this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. The truth was revealed a week after our reunion with our son. As we continued our regular meetings at the police station, Matthew was gradually opening up to us. That day too, we were spending peaceful time in the meeting room. Suddenly, tension filled the room as several police officers hurriedly entered. There's been a significant development. The detective's expression had lost its usual calmness. We've arrested your sister, Lauren Miller. When I heard those words, my world seemed to stop. Lauren? My twin sister. I wanted to believe it was some mistake. But Matthew's expression told everything. He was looking down, trembling slightly. Aunt Lauren. I'm sorry. With those words, all reality came crashing down. 10 years ago, the person who took my son from the shopping mall was my sister, who was like my other self. That's why Matthew went with her without question. During interrogation, the whole truth came to light. That day, Lauren appeared dressed like me and had parked a Toyota minivan in the parking lot that she had prepared in advance. Security cameras in the children's clothing section captured her approaching the kids' space looking exactly like me. "Mom's here." At those words, my 3-year-old son took her hand without any doubt. Even his crying would look like just a tired child's bad mood. It was a perfect plan. For 10 years, Lauren had meticulously planned her life with my son. The first 2 years were spent in Portland among artists, living inconspicuously in an area where homeschooling was common. The next 3 years were in Boise, Idaho, living in the suburbs where privacy could be maintained. And the last 5 years were spent in the nature-rich area of Missoula, Montana, minimizing contact with people. Her motive was a twisted obsession with me and revenge. During interrogation, Lauren told everything. Her engagement to Thomas had been broken off 2 months earlier. The cause was his comparison with me. "Why can't you have a life like your sister? She's built a perfect family." Those words left a deep wound in her heart. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Since childhood, our parents had unconsciously compared us. Academic performance, extracurricular activities, friendships. In everything, Lauren was seen as Catherine's sister. Then came my marriage, childbirth, career. While everything was envied by others as ideal, twisted emotions grew inside her. How did Matthew spend those 10 years? Lauren had kept showing him my photos. This is your real mother. But we can't be together now. My young son had no choice but to accept this explanation. Aunt Lauren was actually kind, Matthew told the police. But sometimes she cried. Especially on my birthday nights. Every year on his birthday, my son was shown our photos and told stories about his real family. However, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Deep-rooted feelings of inferiority from childhood. Constant comparisons throughout school years. Different expectations from parents. And jealousy towards my perfect life. All of these had eaten away at her heart. I deserved to be happy too. When I heard her words from the interrogation from the detective, I was speechless. I had been completely blind to my sister's suffering. For 10 years, Lauren had moved between 3 states with my son, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Using her work as a freelance web designer, she had carefully lived to avoid being traced. The trial began. In court, I faced my sister for the first time. She had grown thin and lost the light in her eyes. Her once confident expression was gone, replaced only by deep regret. When she noticed my gaze, she opened her mouth slightly. "Catherine, I'm truly sorry. I just wanted to be a mother like you." At those words, I couldn't contain my emotions. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of release. And the painful realization of my sister's suffering that I had failed to notice. Everything was mixed together. During the trial, both Lauren's calculated planning and her mental instability became clear. She had never abused or neglected my son, rather, she had showered him with excessive affection. His school grades were excellent, and there were no problems in their relationships with neighbors. However, the psychological evaluation revealed that all of this was compulsive behavior aimed at playing the role of the perfect mother. To me, Matthew was truly my son, Lauren testified tearfully on the stand. But it was all happiness built on lies. David was my support throughout. He accompanied me to court and lent his shoulder when I broke down in tears. And above all, he devoted himself to caring for Matthew. "She always showed me your pictures," Matthew said one day. "Said you were my real mother." But somehow, it felt different. The sentence was 25 years in prison. While there were mitigating circumstances, the gravity of a planned kidnapping was taken into consideration. As Lauren left the courtroom, she turned back to look at us one last time. Tears of remorse glistened in her eyes. Our life afterward gradually took on a new shape. Matthew received care from specialists while slowly increasing time with family. School transfer preparations were made carefully. Living together might be too early right now. The counselor suggested this. Indeed, 10 years isn't easily bridged. But we had time. On weekends, we enjoyed picnics in the park or went to movies. Sometimes we just sat quietly together, sharing time. These small accumulations built our new bonds. "Mom, will you read my favorite book to me?" One day, Matthew asked this. It was the first time he had initiated parent-child time on his own. I sat beside him, savoring the joy. After a year, Matthew officially chose to live with us. We prepared a room for him filled with space for 10 years' worth of memories. From now on, let's create new memories together. We all quietly nodded at David's words. Time can be both healing and challenging. But we are definitely moving forward. We can't get back the lost 10 years. Still, the time ahead belongs to us. My mother-in-law Margaret also warmly welcomed her grandson's return, truly delighting in it. Her warmth within strictness has strengthened our family bonds even more. Now, the morning light streaming through the window seems brighter than before. Each new morning brings new hope. After all, our story is just beginning again.
I'm trying to write this in a way so that no one will be able to research and find out who I am or my brother is. But it's the internet and everyone's a super sleuth. My brother went missing years ago. And when I say missing, I mean that his case was declared one of those creepy, unsolved mysteries. It was on the news. I distinctly remember my parents interviewing for the news in our living room. I think I know what happened to him. I was very young when he went missing. I barely remember him, but I do remember that I loved him a lot. He would pull me around our block in a wagon. Most kids his age didn't do that. The days before he disappeared, I remember him staying home and babysitting me. I stayed in my room and played Nintendo 64. Throughout the day, a guy came over. I remember him. He was older, almost our dad's age. My brother made me go into my room whenever I heard the doorbell. Later, after the guy left, my brother would ask me not to say anything about the guy. With my brain only being focused on video games and extra dessert at that age, I agreed. I didn't care, nor did I comprehend the gravity of the situation. The day before he disappeared, I remember the older guy coming over. I was in the kitchen and remember looking up and seeing him kiss my brother. They hugged. They didn't care that I saw them. The older guy waved at me and I waved back, then I kept watching cartoons. I fell asleep on the couch and woke up to my brother whispering outside our front door. "Don't worry, he's asleep," he said. The older guy said something I couldn't hear. Then my brother said something I couldn't make out, but I made out the words visit them or maybe he said visit him. Either way, I know the word visits was in his sentence. The man raised his voice and said no. Then I heard plan and city. Then I fell asleep again. The next morning, the day he disappeared, my parents were at work. My brother was acting very strange. I remember he kept checking the clock. In the afternoon, I remember him picking me up and asking me if I wanted to go in the wagon. I was too hooked on Nintendo 64 and said no. He almost begged me, and I said no again. Then he told me he had to run to our neighbor's house for something. I don't even remember what he said. I said okay. He reminded me to not open the door for anyone, only Mom and Dad. I shouted at him, okay, because Super Mario was getting on my nerves and he wasn't helping. He gave me a hug and told me he loved me and left. He never came back. All these years, decades later, and I think he was in love with that man. I know he was. The memories randomly came flooding back to me earlier. I'm not quite sure why, but it has been taking over my thoughts lately. I can't sleep because I keep thinking about it. I think my brother left with that man, and they ran away together. Or maybe something worse happened, but I don't think that's the case. My freshman year of college, I was part of a sports team that got national recognition. I remember my team's picture was on ESPN and with our university's name. A few days later, I got mail at my dorm. It was a gift basket. I thought it was from my parents, so I didn't read the card. I threw it away immediately and ate what was in it, but it was nothing but candy. Nerds, Jolly Ranchers, Tootsie Rolls, and Hershey's Kissies. I called my dad and thanked him for the gift basket, and he said he didn't send one, neither did Mom. Then I got to thinking. All of those candies were what I used to eat as a kid. Literally all I ate for the earliest years of my life were those candies. I tried to find the card, but I couldn't. Then I began to think about how my brother would wheel me in the wagon to the gas station close to our house so I could get candy after dinner. even though it was a punishable, by death no-no from Mom. Months later, during Christmas, I got an unmarked Christmas card. The only thing written on it was a Gubbio smiley. Since then, I've heard nothing. No one I know sent that card. I have never responded. I find her every day if he's out there. I have never told anyone this. When the police asked me what happened that day, I told them that he went to the neighbors because that's all I remembered. Honestly. It destroyed my parents. My mom became addicted to painkillers, and my dad has had 3 extramarital affairs, which I know this tragedy is no way an excuse to cheat, but it sure didn't help. It has ruined our family, and maybe my brother knows what he did. Maybe he regrets it and knows he can't come back home. But if I could see him today, I would just want to tell him that he is always welcome in my home. I love you so much, brother. We have so much catching up to do. Please come home, please. Update 1? It's 4 p.m. I'm drunk low. These past few weeks have been insane. I posted on here before. My brother went missing a long time ago. I thought he ran away from home. Long story short, I got into contact with some detectives that our family has known since my brother went missing. When I started asking questions, they told me that my brother was no longer on any missing persons registry. When I asked what that meant, they told me that he was removed per my parents' request. I asked my parents, my dad actually. My dad ignored me. My mom told me my brother is alive and okay far as she knows. They found my brother years ago, a very, very long time ago, and found out he was living with another man. He's gay, and it disgusted my parents. He tried reaching out to them. They told him they didn't want anything to do with him, and that I didn't remember him, and wouldn't want to see him. I went ballistic. My parents weren't fazed by it. They sincerely hate my brother for who he is. For being gay, they kept him a secret from me all my life. My brother missed the birth of his nephew. He missed my wedding, graduations, everything. Just because of my parents. They lied to me. I've been able to get a phone number and contact information from police officers. My brother left it all open in case anyone from our family wanted to contact him. I still can't work up the nerve to call him. The address I have for him is across the F country, but he's alive. My brother is alive. I'm drunk as F right now because I can't deal with any of this. I haven't talked to my parents in weeks, and I never plan on speaking to them again. Not for what they've done to me or my brother. This is real and it happened. It happened. It is happening right now. I don't know how to process this at all. My parents let me believe my brother was dead or kidnapped forever, when in reality he just ran away, and when he wanted to come back, they disowned him. I'm crying right now. How could you do that? I'm sorry. Update 2. Here's an update for you all. The day after I made my last post, I woke up and called into work. I told my wife, who is essentially my confidant, and I tell her everything, the whole story. She wasn't really surprised. She's not a fan of my parents much, but like many of you, she told me to call the number I was given for my brother immediately. She insisted on it. She took herself and my son out for a day together so I could be alone to talk with him. I dialed the number about 7 times before I actually pressed the call button. It started ringing and I hung up. Then I got frustrated at myself and called the number back. It rang and I got a voicemail, but it was the automated voice, not anyone else's. I didn't leave a voicemail. I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. I called my wife and told her to come home, and she refused until I had talked to someone on the other end of the phone. About an hour of pacing and drinking 2 glasses of scotch at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I called the number again. It rang 3 times. I panicked. I hung up, but this time the number was calling me back. I swear to whatever God above, I thought my heart was going to stop. I almost threw up right there. I answered the call. The first thing I heard on the other end of the line was a guy laughing in the background. There was wind on the phone. The person on the other end was outside, and it was windy. Who is this? It was his voice. I knew that voice. It was my brother, who had been gone for my entire life. I covered my mouth with my shaking hands and just sat there. He kept asking me who it was. The guy in the background was trying to talk over him. He hung up on me. I called him back right away. He answered again. Me being a creepy ass, the first thing I said after decades of not seeing him and thinking he was dead. I blurted, "I got your number." He asked me who I was and what I wanted. I said it's me. There was a really long pause. I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard him tell someone to turn the radio down and roll the window up. The sound of wind stopped, and then he asked me my name. I told him, and he said that I was lying. I told him I got his number from the Missing Children's Network and detectives. I heard him gasp. He asked me what color shoelaces he wore to a picnic when we were kids, and I remember my mom getting mad at his orange laces with blue shoes. It was the last time we were together as a family. I could tell he was crying. The first thing he asked me was, "Where are you?" And I told him I lived a few hours away from home. Without hesitating, he told me, "I'm coming." He went straight to the airport without any luggage, bought a plane ticket, and flew straight to me. We stayed on the phone with each other the whole time. When he was walking through the gate, I knew who he was right away. He is middle-aged, salt and pepper hair, muscular. He looks just like our dad, only better. I know if I told him that would make him mad. I literally pushed an old lady out of the way, and I just hugged him. He's about 2 inches taller than me. He was able to pick me up. He was crying, I was having a breakdown. We went to a bar at the airport. He wouldn't let me out of his sight. He kept holding onto my arm. He kept telling me how unreal it all was. He apologized to me. He kept crying, telling me he felt horrible. I told him to forget everything and tell me about his life. He's married. His husband is a doctor, a pediatric oncologist. They live in the Pacific Northwest. They have 2 children, girls, 12 and 8. He works as a legal consultant and has his own firm. He has an amazing life. He told me that he thought I hated him and wanted nothing to do with him. We sat at the bar for hours, literal hours. I think we sat for about 6 hours before I begged him to come home and meet my wife. We got home, and my wife was a mess. She hugged him and insisted he stay with us. At this point, his husband was going insane and kept calling him. He had no idea what was going on. He thought he had eloped or something. It was crazy for a couple of days until everything was explained and out in the open. My son and my brother were like 2 peas in a pod. Honestly, I never wanted children. My son was an amazing accident, but I'm not good with kids. I'm always afraid I'm going to break them. But my brother is a pro. Kids love him. He stayed with us for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, everything about my life changed. His husband and 2 daughters flew in to stay with us. My brother-in-law and my 2 nieces. My family. They were my family. They are my family. My brother wants my wife and I to move to be closer to him. My wife is on board. I work as a professor at a university and have already started to send out feelers to see if there are any open positions, and I've found one that is actually tenured and higher pay. I do not plan on forgiving my parents, but my brother still loves them. He went by their house and knocked on the door. My father shut the door in his face. My mother gave him a hug and told him to take care of himself. Then she shut him out. I can't forgive them for that. I have no reason to stay close to them. I want to be with my family. I want to make up for all the lost time. It's 2 a.m. right now, and I'm drinking a tall glass of scotch and grading papers. My beautiful, wonderful, smart, amazing wife is asleep on the couch. She likes to watch me grade papers. My son is asleep in his room, cuddled up with all the stuffed animals his uncle brought him. And I'm here, so happy, so fulfilled knowing that my family has grown and doubled in size so suddenly. My heart is happy. I am so happy right now, Reddit. I am so happy. Update 3. Hi everyone. A few months ago I posted a notice that I had met my brother that my parents had disowned and didn't tell me, letting me assume that he went missing. Here is that update. I met my brother that was missing. Now here I'm posting an update over 6 months later. Thank you all for everything so far. Everything in my life has changed in the last 10 months. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. I want to apologize for neglecting this account. I've been busy. I want to fill you all in on what's been going on in my life. I owe everyone who has messaged and commented that much, at the very least. My wife's son and myself have moved. Not exactly to the same region in the country as my brother and his family, but much closer to him. I got a new job teaching at a new university months ago. While it's not a tenured position, it gives me the option to do research, which is my favorite thing to do. My brother-in-law's family has had many interesting discussions with each other trying to describe what has happened between my brother and I. They're a pretty open-minded and accepting family, so to hear what we have been through was absolutely shocking to them. My brother never told his husband the truth about his life, only that he didn't speak to his family anymore. Nevertheless, they welcomed me and my family with open arms when we came to visit. It was like we had always been part of their family. I feel content knowing that they are my family. When my brother ran away with his first boyfriend, he was verging on 18. He has elaborated and told me that the relationship with the man was abusive, and when he tried to leave and return home, our parents would not let him. So he was forced to stay with an abusive man because he had nowhere else to go until he moved away to college. This deepened my anger for my parents, but my brother, still to this day, has this ridiculous sense of hope and optimism. I love that about him because I don't have that. My brother and I are two very different people, but in a way that works well. We reflected on my teenage years, and I filled him in on what happened with my life. My brother is very quiet and observant. He always watches before he intervenes. He's soft-spoken and gently objects when someone says something he disagrees with. He's patient, kind, and optimistic, as I've said. He has a very loving heart, so I think that's why he has an unrelenting faith in our parents. Me, on the other hand, I'm abrasive, impatient, and quick to jump to conclusions. My wife wanted me to add about me. Doesn't separate laundry, refuses to mop the floors, and can't properly change the oil. Despite being very different, we have this uncanny ability to be thinking the same thing. Even though we have been separated for several years, we can still give each other a look and know exactly what the other is plotting. My brother has been able to create a spectacular life for himself, all on his own. One thing I struggle with is knowing that he went through more than half of his life by himself, putting himself through college and law school, all alone. The more he filled me in about the years away from our parents, the more angry I became. I severed communication with my parents months ago, after the last time I posted on here, and it has done wonders for my own mental health. But then the election happened a few weeks ago. In all honesty, I don't even have the words to summarize what this presidential election was. I don't want to make this political, but this whole thing, by its nature, is political and serves a great purpose. I've read messages on here of people saying that they, too, have been disowned by family for being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or other identifying. I've heard so many stories from Redditors across the country, telling me that they are scared, alone and afraid every single day of their lives, all because of who they fundamentally are. The day after the election, my brother and his husband were devastated. My wife, who is a black woman, was devastated. It's not just Donald Trump himself. It's his supporters, followers, and the ideology that took hold with so many people. Where I come from, Donald Trump's hateful rhetoric on registering Muslims and disenfranchising LGBT and minoritized peoples was heralded as something genius and revolutionary. But to me, it is a personal attack on my family. I have been in shock and disgusted for days. I had to explain to my son what it all means and why the world is not always a good place. I had to have the same conversation with him when his grandparents did not like him because of his dark skin. The day after the election, however, I got a call from my mother. I didn't answer it because I was in class, but she left a voicemail and said she would like to talk at my earliest convenience. I thought on it, still enraged, but decided to call her back, more out of curiosity than a desire to speak with her. When we began our conversation, she asked how I was doing. My answers were short, one-worded. She jumped right in, and I could tell she was uncomfortable. She apologized. But she apologized only to me. I wasn't fazed by this. I told my mother that she should talk to my brother, and unless she did that then, she need not call me anymore. I told my brother that our mother had called and apologized, and the look on his face was pure happiness. I can't even begin to describe it to you all. It was as if all of his dreams had come true. My brother called our mother, and she, to my surprise, picked up. They had a short conversation, and my brother's happy glow had dimmed somewhat when he got off the phone. He told me that she said that, given the election results, she had only wanted to speak to me, I guess, alluding to the fact that I'm a white, straight male, the normal person, in an effort to repair the family and that we all need. My mom and dad, not my brother, need each other now. She also went on to say she does not approve of what my brother does, but she had read up on his lifestyle and recommended conversion therapy. My brother ended the call with a very gentle, "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't do that. I love you, good night." I think my brother has been broken these last few weeks, and the hope and optimism that naturally carries him through life has been eradicated. He's buried himself in work and ignores any discussion around our family. My wife is a counselor, and she normally avoids counseling people she doesn't work with. But she's told me that the only thing I can do for my brother at this point is to be there for him and to never let him be alone again. Like I said before, though, I have a tendency to lash out and be aggressive. Yesterday, while stewing on my own rage about my parents, I called my mother, and when she answered, I just began screaming into the phone. I unleashed a lot of things, and I remember crying while I did so, because I was so enraged. I told her how much she hurt my brother, her son, and how she put his life in danger, all for her ideology. I told her how unfair and upsetting it is that her and my dad would do this to their children, to my brother, how it's criminal and how they should be punished. When I finished screaming, I was going to hang up because she miraculously hadn't during my 10-minute tirade, but she cut in with a quiet, "He sounds grown." My mother acknowledged my brother's existence with that short sentence. Then she went on with, "I'm so sorry. Let me speak to him, okay?" But I didn't. I hung up, then I blocked her number. I don't know what she wanted to say, but I'm afraid it is something that could damage my brother further. We are currently staying with him for the Thanksgiving holiday. My view right now is this. My wife and my brother-in-law are sitting on the living room floor trying to assemble an IKEA shelf. My son is beside me watching cartoons and keeps telling his mother and uncle to AW, and my brother is in the kitchen washing dishes. This is a life that people want to see destroyed, taken away, and converted. This is a life I am so grateful to have, and it is filled with people that this world is lucky to have on its surface. I haven't told my brother that our mom tried to call, and I don't want to. I don't think there's a point. I just want to spend as much time and energy as I can trying to love my brother, my family, my small little slice of bliss. This is my heaven. This is a life I will proudly defend against hate and intolerance and bigotry. I'm so lucky to have this life, these people and this happiness, and I will never stop fighting for it.
I'm completely lost because I just found out that my 42 male and wife 36 female of 12 years has been having an affair from the police who called me in for questioning involving the assault of her lover. I don't know what I'm doing right now. I don't know if this is the right sub or even if I should be posting this, but I don't have a clear mind right now, and I'm here to ask for some direction. I've been married to my wife for 12 years. We have an amazing 11-year-old son. Until last night, I thought we had a good marriage. I thought I was always really good to her. We have no money problems, no intimacy problems, and I've never taken her for granted. I honestly wake up every morning and thank God she is my wife. Now, I don't know what to think. I got a call from my local PD as I was getting off work yesterday. They asked if I could come to the police station as soon as possible. I panicked. I asked if something had happened to my wife or son, but they said not to worry, just get to the station ASAP. When I got there, they put me in a room with a table and some chairs. They asked me my name, which I gave. Then they started asking all these questions about a guy my wife works with. I haven't seen or spoken to this guy literally since December 2019 at my wife's company Christmas party. The two officers kept asking me things like, "How long have you known?" and "How did you find out?" The only answer I could give was, "What are you talking about?" After about an hour of this, I just stopped answering their questions and kept asking where my son and wife were, and were they safe. We just kept going around and around until after about 2 hours on and off, because they would periodically leave the room for 15 to 20 minutes, then come back and start it all over again like some cheap cop show. The last time they came in, the cop handed me a tablet and showed me a video of my wife and the guy from her work having sex. I don't remember much right after that. I just remember screaming, "What the F is this?" over and over again. I had a full-blown panic attack right there in the middle of the police station. The police had a paramedic check me out, and he said my blood pressure was something like 170/100. He wanted me to go to the hospital, but I refused and said I needed to find my wife and my son. After I calmed down, the officers explained the guy in the video had been having an affair with my wife and apparently several other women. He had been found that morning in his driveway beaten, raped, and set on fire. He was still alive, but in critical condition, and they didn't know if he would make it. His wife had given them permission to go through his phone and computer, and that's where they found the video of my wife. They asked me where I was that morning, and I told them the gym, then work about 10 minutes from my gym. At that point, they said I could go, but that I might not want to stay at my house because they didn't know if his affair with my wife could be why he was attacked. They also said my wife wasn't the only person he was having an affair with. That's when I rushed home. My son was staying with our neighbors, so I got him and went home. We packed some clothes and his laptop for school. I grabbed my gun and we headed to my parents' house 45 minutes away. I still haven't heard from my wife. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. I've called the officer who gave me his card, and he said she is at the hospital with the guy she's been cheating with. I am sitting here in bed with my son on one side of me and my 38 on the other. My dad is sleeping in his chair in the living room with a shotgun across his lap, and I've not slept in over 30 hours. I don't even know where to start. Anything would be helpful right now. Any advice or ideas. I am in a fog. Update 1. I attempted to post this on Saturday, but it didn't go through, and I got blocked from reposting because I asked a yes/no question anyway. Here it is again. I am working a bit, so I may not be able to reply that much right now. My original post was removed, but a lot of people messaged me and asked for an update. I thought I would fill everyone in on what has happened this week, because the replies I got helped me so much. I really feel like I owe this community a big thank you for helping me get my head on straight and pointed me in the right direction to get everything done as fast as possible. For those people who said my post was fake, my only reply is I wish, from the bottom of my heart, it was. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. For those who said they couldn't find a news story, apparently due to the nature of the attack, a lot of information was withheld. Even our local news outlets only reported it as an assault, and it was nothing more than a blurb on our nightly news. For those who implied or directly stated the police wouldn't do that, you are 100 wrong, because they did. I found out from my lawyer that police can literally do or say anything they want, especially if you aren't under arrest short of direct threats of harm. That includes lying directly to your face, which they did. It turns out my wife wasn't at the hospital with her lover when I contacted the detective. She had been admitted to that hospital's psychiatric facility much earlier in the day while he was still in surgery. I don't know why they would lie about that, but they did. Needless to say, this situation has caused me to become very suspicious of law enforcement. After I woke up that afternoon, I contacted my uncle's law partner, who is a family friend. He actually came to my parents' house and sat down with me to go over my options. His entire law firm is now representing me, both in the divorce and criminal defense. That day, a Sunday, he got me an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife for me, my son, and my parents. Our court date is in 60 days. The police served her on Monday as she was leaving the psych hospital. According to her brother, who is a close personal friend of mine, she did not take it well. She is staying with her parents for the time being. I still haven't talked to her, and she hasn't made any attempt to speak to me either. Whether that's due to shame, indifference, or the order of protection, I don't know, but I'm glad of it all the same. My wife is not the person I thought she was, and I'm ashamed of myself for not seeing it sooner. I had to tell my son something, so I decided to tell him the truth age appropriate. And literally the first words out of his mouth was, "Please don't let mommy take me away." I asked him why he would say that, and from what he tells me, my wife has been treating him very badly when I wasn't around, and told him if he told me, she would take him away, and my son would never see me again. She's been emotionally torturing our son, and I was too blind to see it. That wrecked me more than the video, to be honest. I told the lawyer about what my son said, and he used my son's statement and her mental state and commitment to get the emergency custody. I have contacted his school for therapy resources, but he will start therapy after the first of the year. I feel like the worst father to ever walk the face of the earth at this point. As for our families, her parents contacted me Tuesday and asked to come see us. I was still at my parents' at the time, and I told them they could come, but she was not allowed anywhere near us. They agreed. They were so apologetic and her poor mother didn't stop crying the entire time she was with us. Her father was heartbroken and kept referring to my wife as that girl. They both said they felt like something was going on with her, and they did not raise her to be this way. We hugged and cried before they left, and I told them they will always be a part of our lives no matter what happens with the divorce. After what my son told me, their visit was the hardest part of our whole ordeal. My lawyers have been doing amazing work so far. They found out that the man my wife was sleeping with has a long criminal record. One of the lawyers informed me that when they went to print out the guy's arrest record, the printer ran for 5 minutes straight. From what they could learn, he's currently on parole for drug offenses and has had gang affiliations in the past. He is still alive, but in critical condition, and still may not make it. The firm has an investigator who contacted the coworker who drove my wife to the hospital. The coworker informed them that my wife's affair was an open secret around the office. My lawyers think that's how the police figured out who I was and who my wife was in the video. There's several photos of last year's Christmas party at her work, and my wife and I are in several of them. That's where I currently am in this whole situation. I am just numb, still lost and heartbroken. How long does the numbness last, and is there any way to get past this emotional lethargy faster? I mean really numb, like a dream. Everything I've just said has felt like it's happening to someone else. Update 2. Sorry for the novel, but I just needed to vent and get this week off my chest. LDR. Found out wife was cheating from cops questioning me about the assault of the guy she was cheating with. Divorcing. Now she claims she has substance abuse problems and asks for another chance. I feel like an idiot for not seeing it when we were together. I will start off again by saying thank you to everyone who replied to both my original post and my update. This sub really did help me so much. If I didn't respond to you directly, I'm sorry, but I got so many messages I can't keep up with them all. First, my son is doing so much better. He started therapy the first week of Jan, and the difference is already noticeable. I asked him if he felt comfortable with me talking to his therapist, and he said yes, so I've had a few discussions with her. According to the therapist, my STBX would verbally and emotionally abuse our son whenever they were alone together. He was not allowed to make noise or bother her in any way when he was home. She would leave him alone for hours on end, and even overnight if I was out of town. She would then threaten him with being taken away and never see me again if he told me or anyone else. The therapist said this has made him feel powerless and dependent in a time in his development that she should actually be feeling empowered and self-reliant. So to that end, I have bought him his own phone and helped him memorize family members' phone numbers and as many addresses as are relevant. I've also been teaching him situational awareness, to pay attention to street names and how to read addresses on buildings. We've also role-played how to ask people for help, how he can clearly explain to strangers that he's in trouble, and he doesn't feel safe. I know this may sound silly, but my son can be a bit introverted and shy when he doesn't feel comfortable. Even though we've only been doing this for a few weeks, I can see that it's really building his confidence. Any suggestions on how to continue to build his self-reliance would be really helpful. His safety and well-being is still my #1 concern right now. As for myself, I'm doing as good as can be expected. I started therapy around the same time as my son, and although I don't speak to my therapist as much as he does, it has helped to be able to talk through my thoughts and feelings about everything that has happened to us and our family. The numbness is gone, but it was replaced by a white-hot ball of anger in the pit at my stomach whenever I think of my STBX and what she's put our family through. Funny enough, although I hate feeling angry, it's a lot easier to deal with than the numbness. My therapist says, this is part of the grieving process, and it's not how we feel, but how we channel those emotions that matter. My legal situation, well, I'll be honest, is the scariest thing I've ever dealt with in my life. I was awarded temporary full custody and child support, which I didn't want. But my lawyer pretty much demanded we ask for, as well as a continuation of the order of protection for myself and my son. At the request for an order, a hearing which neither my wife nor her lawyer showed up to, The judge asked if we would allow supervised visitation, but my son absolutely refused, which was why my lawyer told me to bring him along. The judge asked my son if he would speak to him alone, and he agreed. The judge, stenographer, and a child welfare officer went into chambers with my son and met for about 10 minutes. After their meeting, the judge granted the temp orders and ordered therapy and psychological evaluation for my son. Luckily, the therapist he's seeing is somehow involved with or accredited to work with the courts, so he doesn't have to see another therapist. My lawyer said this is a good thing because it means his therapist can give a recommendation for custody. But it still scares the hell out of me that she could get some form of custody after what she put him through. As for the app, I don't know much. From what my lawyers have gathered, he's alive, but still in the hospital. I haven't heard from the police since my initial interview, so nothing new to report there. As for my TBX, I still hadn't seen her since the day I was questioned until Thursday. She has attempted to call me a few times, but I haven't answered. And when she called from another number, I hung up immediately. I have nothing to say to her, and I don't want to hear anything she has to say to me. Her lawyer requested a preliminary hearing for our court-appointed mediation. She was served the second week of January. She was there with her lawyer, and I know this will sound petty, but even with the mask, she looked bad. My STBX was always an attractive and athletic woman. I swear in our wedding photos, she looks like a supermodel, but now she's lost so much weight it's disturbing. She looks sick and frail. She didn't even look at me. She just sat with her face down through most of the meeting. Long story short, everything they asked for was ridiculous. They wanted visitation during the divorce proceedings and shared custody after. They want us to drop the ops. She wants to cohabitate until the divorce is finalized. I'm not joking. After all this, she wants to live in the same house. It was so insulting that my head throbbed through the whole meeting. But it was all worth it for the big reveal we gave to her lawyer. Her lawyer asked how we should handle discovery for the division of assets, to which my lawyer got this shocked look on his face and said, "What division of assets? Read the prenup." The look on her lawyer's face was priceless. She hadn't told her lawyer about the prenup. My late uncle, who was the founding partner of the law firm I use, wrote that prenup and actually hired her a lawyer to look over it for her before we married. According to my lawyer, it's a thing of beauty because we never mixed finances. Guess my uncle's instructions. The house we live in was a gift to me from my uncle before we married. All the utilities and insurances are in my name. All the vehicles are registered in the owner's name only. And we never had to sign for any debt for each other. We have one shared savings account that is used for household maintenance and an emergency fund. It has around $8,000 in it, which she has already drained. There is less than $300 in it now. The prenup states that all marital assets and debt are to be divided 50-50. And ownership of all intangible assets and personal debt reverts back to the individual who accrued it. The adultery clause simply states that we agreed that if either party is caught or admits to committing adultery, they lose the right to claim any form of spousal support. There's a lot more to it than this, but my lawyer assures me that trying to break this prenup will be damn near impossible, because it is the most fair prenup he's ever read. But the last thing her lawyer asked for was what has really messed with me. He asked that we postpone the official mediation for 6 months while my STBX attends an inpatient rehabilitation facility for substance abuse. Some people in both my last posts stated that she might have a substance abuse issue, but I didn't even think about it, because I couldn't even fathom that. I talked to my lawyer, and he said that we would discuss it and get back with them about our decision on that. Before we left, my STBX spoke, literally for the first time, and asked me to read a letter she had written me. My lawyer gave me "this could be a snake, so be careful" look, and I debated with myself for a moment but decided to take it. When I got home, I read it, and now I wish I hadn't. It started off with all those busted cheater platitudes that everyone warned me about. I love you. I love our family. I know I mistreated Seln. I hate myself for it. I want UC again. But she did explain that after a major surgery she had about 2 years ago, she started abusing her medication. After a while, she started buying them from some of the people she worked with, including App. He became her go-to guy, and when she ran out of money, she started sleeping with him to make up the difference. She said she hid this from me because she was afraid I would make her stop, and she couldn't feel right without them anymore. That he meant nothing to her, but a fix, and she hates herself for doing what she's done both to herself and to us. Now she says she understands how awful what she's done is and wants to get better for our family, and asks me to at least give her some time to prove she wants this. Let me state for the record, I will never get back with my wife. Our marriage was over the moment she cheated on me and abused our son, but damn, where the F was I while all this was going on? I just feel like the most naive, obtuse idiot to ever walk the earth. And furthermore, how should I approach this from here? Am I just throwing her away, or am I still justified in feeling betrayed? I feel like such a failure as a husband and a father right now. I mean, I feel nothing for her but anger and resentment. But is this how you treat someone fighting the demons she's fighting? I'm just lost and feel so hopeless again. Anyway, any advice would be much appreciated here.
I am Carol Harrison. On a spring morning in the suburbs of Boston, I was savoring my morning coffee while gazing at the flowers in the garden through the window. Even at 62, the morning silence remains my daily source of energy. Grandma, can we go to the park today? Suddenly, my grandson Aiden came running down the stairs. His blue eyes were shining with excitement. Of course, Aiden. But first, we need to have a good breakfast. Aiden is a remarkably intelligent and kind child for his 8 years. Like my son Mark and his wife Sarah, he has a strong intellectual curiosity. As I was preparing to go to the park with Aiden after breakfast, I heard the front door open. Hey, Mark. About Aiden's cram school. Sarah, enough about that. Now is not the time. I could hear Mark and Sarah's voices. They've been going through divorce proceedings recently and are in fierce conflict over Aiden's custody. My heart aches, but I must maintain composure in front of Aiden. Good morning, you two, I called out cheerfully. Oh, good morning, Mom, Sarah hurriedly put on a smile. Mom, thanks for looking after Aiden today, Mark said with a tired expression. The tension between the two was almost palpable. Dad, Mom, I'm going to the park with Grandma. Aiden shouted energetically. Be careful, Aiden, Sarah smiled gently. Have fun, Mark also showed a smile. When we arrived at the park, Aiden immediately ran towards the playground equipment. The spring sunlight made his blonde hair shine. Aiden, don't go too far, I called out as I sat on a bench. Okay, I got it. He turned back and waved. I opened the book I had brought and enjoyed reading while occasionally checking on Aiden. The laughter of other children echoed around us. It was a peaceful Saturday afternoon. Grandma, can you push me on the swing? Aiden came running over. Of course, dear. We played on the swing and then built a castle in the sandbox. We were having so much fun that we lost track of time. I'm a bit thirsty. I'll go buy some juice, so wait here, okay? Okay, got it. While I was heading to the vending machine, Aiden continued playing in the sandbox. It was only a matter of minutes. When I returned, Aiden was no longer in the sandbox. Aiden? Aiden, where are you? I looked around, but he was nowhere to be seen. My heart started racing. Aiden. I desperately searched the entire park. Other parents helped too, but Aiden couldn't be found. Fear enveloped me. With trembling hands, I took out my cell phone and called Mark. Mark, Aiden. I can't find Aiden anywhere. At that moment, my world began to crumble. When Mark arrived at the park, I was sitting on a bench with my face in my hands. I could hear his footsteps approaching. Mom. Mark's voice had an urgency I'd never heard before. Where's Aiden? I explained the situation through tears. Mark's expression darkened. Have you called the police? Yes, Before I could finish, we heard police sirens. 2 patrol cars arrived at the park entrance, and uniformed officers got out. Are you Mrs. Harrison? One officer approached us. Please tell us the details of the situation. As we were explaining to the officer, Sarah arrived, out of breath. Aiden. Where's Aiden? Her voice was trembling. Mark briefly explained the situation to her. Sarah glanced at me with what seemed like an accusing look for a moment. But that expression quickly vanished, replaced by one of determination. Let's search. He must be nearby. The police moved swiftly. They searched the park, questioned nearby residents, and checked security cameras. We also split up, calling Aiden's name while searching the entire park. As time passed, the sun began to set. Fatigue was evident on Mark's face, but he continued the search without rest. Sarah, who had been desperately searching at first, gradually began to slow down. Sarah, are you all right? When I called out to her, she turned around, looking slightly startled. Huh? Oh, yes, just a bit tired. At that moment, I noticed a strange light in her eyes. But there was no time to dwell on it. As night fell, the police set up a search headquarters. We answered questions and provided photos of Aiden. One of the investigators approached us. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, is there anyone who might hold a grudge against your child? Mark shook his head. No, Aiden is loved by everyone. I understand you're going through divorce proceedings. In relation to that, Sarah suddenly interrupted. Are you suspecting us? The officer maintained his composure as he replied, we need to consider all possibilities. That night, none of us could sleep. Feelings of guilt continued to torment me. I had only taken my eyes off him for a moment. The next day, the search expanded to a wider area. Volunteers joined in, and the town was flooded with Aiden's photos. Mark was moving around tirelessly, but I began to notice subtle changes in Sarah's attitude. Sarah, shall we search the southern area as well? When Mark suggested this, Sarah hesitated before answering. Yes, but I don't think Aiden could have gone that far. I felt uneasy about those words. Sarah's eyes seemed to reflect an emotion other than anxiety. On the third day of the search, there was a new report from the police. We found footage of a suspicious car on a security camera near the park. We're currently tracking that vehicle. This news gave us a glimmer of hope. However, Sarah's reaction was strange. For a moment, she seemed to turn pale. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark asked worriedly. "Yes, I'm just tired." I silently stared at Sarah. A thought began to grow in my mind that she might be hiding something. 5 years have passed since Aiden disappeared. Time has mercilessly moved on, seasons have changed, and our lives have slowly but surely transformed. Every year on Aiden's birthday, we gather as a family and offer a silent prayer around his photo. This year, he would have turned 13. As I gazed at the photo of his innocent smile on the table, I let out a deep sigh. "Mom, would you like another cup of coffee?" Mark called from the kitchen. "Yes, please." Mark had immersed himself in work. Perhaps to distract himself from the grief, or to escape reality. The color of fatigue was always heavy under his eyes, and he rarely smiled anymore. "How are you doing lately, Mark?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "Same as always. Just work, work, every day." I could sense a hint of resignation behind those words. Meanwhile, Sarah's behavior had been changing, slowly but surely. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but I began to feel something off about her actions. One day, I noticed Sarah hurriedly trying to leave the house. "Sarah, are you going somewhere?" "Yes, just a quick errand," she answered vaguely and rushed out. These frequent outings had increased. When asked about her destination, she would give evasive answers. Her cell phone usage had also changed. She would go to a corner of the room to talk in a low voice, or suddenly end calls when we approached. Once, I witnessed her hastily hanging up when she saw the name displayed on the screen of her ringing phone. "Sarah, is something worrying you?" One day, I decided to ask her directly. "No, nothing at all," she answered with a forced smile, but her eyes weren't smiling. The most surprising incident happened one evening during dinner. "Hey, why don't we consider moving?" Sarah suddenly brought up. Mark looked at her with a surprised face. "Why so suddenly?" "I just thought it might be good for a change of pace." There seemed to be something behind this suggestion. This house is filled with memories of Aiden. It was hard to believe that Sarah would easily suggest abandoning that. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, I heard Sarah's footsteps coming down the stairs. She was wearing a coat and holding her keys. "Sarah, where are you going so late?" She flinched for a moment. "Oh, just a quick errand. I'll be right back." As I heard the door close, the doubts in my mind grew larger. What was Sarah hiding? And did it have anything to do with Aiden's disappearance? As Sarah's puzzling behavior continued, my days were filled with anxiety and suspicion. 5 years had passed since Aiden's disappearance, and while the light of hope was growing dim, deep in my heart, the belief that he was alive somewhere never faded. One quiet afternoon, I was in the living room using the computer to digitize old family photos. As I worked, immersed in nostalgic memories, suddenly an unfamiliar icon appeared on the screen. "What's this?" Puzzled, I clicked on it, and a video call screen opened. What appeared was the face of a boy with a frightened expression in a dimly lit room. "Aiden." My voice was trembling. The boy on the screen was undoubtedly my grandson who had disappeared from the park that day. After 5 years, traces of adulthood were beginning to show in his childish features. "Grandma." Aiden's voice echoed. "Help me. It's dark and scary here." I gasped. "Aiden, are you really? Where are you?" "I don't know." His voice was shaking. "But Mom is lying. She's the one who locked me up here." At those words, something froze inside me. Sarah had. "What do you mean?" "Sarah." Aiden looked around cautiously before continuing in a low voice. "Mom makes me do photo shoots. There are scary people here too. I'm not allowed to go outside." Suddenly, there was a sound of a door opening in the distance. The color drained from Aiden's face. "Mom's back. Grandma, help me. But don't tell anyone." With that cry, Aiden hurriedly cut off the call. The screen went dark, and I sat there, dumbfounded. My head was in a whirl of confusion. Aiden was alive. However, his situation was beyond imagination. And the most shocking fact was that Sarah was involved. With trembling hands, I took out my cell phone to call Mark. But I hesitated for a moment. Aiden had said, "Don't tell anyone." But I couldn't leave things as they were. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my resolve. To save Aiden, I needed to act carefully but decisively. I had a gut feeling that this video message would be the turning point that would change everything. After receiving the shocking video message from Aiden, my heart was in turmoil. However, I knew I had to regain my composure. To save Aiden, we needed to act carefully. The next morning, I contacted John Brown, a longtime friend and retired police officer. I knew he would understand this difficult situation and give appropriate advice. "Carol, it's been a while. What's the matter?" John's voice on the phone mixed nostalgia with concern. Taking a deep breath, I told him about the recent developments in Aiden's video message. John listened silently, but I could hear his breathing become a bit ragged. "This is serious. We need to proceed with caution." John's voice became more serious. "First, we need to investigate Sarah's behavior in detail." Following John's advice, I began my own investigation. I started noting Sarah's outing patterns, her phone usage, and the places she had been frequently visiting recently. After a few days of observation, I discovered that Sarah was regularly heading to a warehouse district in the suburbs. So, one day, I decided to follow her. My heart raced as I watched Sarah's car stop in front of an old warehouse. After confirming that she had entered the building, I cautiously approached. Peeking through a window, I could see Sarah talking to someone. I couldn't see who she was talking to, but Sarah's expression wasn't that of the kind mother she usually portrayed. It was cold and calculating. This discovery turned my suspicions into certainty. There was a high possibility that Sarah was hiding Aiden. But why? And did Mark know about this? When I returned home, Mark had just come back from work. Seeing his tired expression, I hesitated, but felt the need to share the truth. "Mark, we need to talk," I carefully began. "What is it, Mom?" He looked at me with a bit of wariness. I told him about Aiden's video message and Sarah's suspicious behavior. I could see Mark's expression gradually changing. "No way. Sarah." Mark's voice mixed disbelief and confusion. "Mom, isn't this some kind of mistake?" "I wish it was," I answered quietly. "But considering Sarah's behavior lately..." Mark collapsed into a chair. "I can't believe it, but if it's true..." Seeing determination color his eyes, I felt a bit relieved. No matter how painful the truth might be, we needed the courage to face it. "Mark, let's get Aiden back together." I placed my hand on his shoulder. Mark slowly nodded. "Yes, we'll find him. And if Sarah really is involved..." His words trailed off, but our resolve was set. To rescue Aiden and reveal the truth. That became our mission from that moment on. As Mark and I continued our joint investigation, shocking facts came to light one after another. With John's help, we dug into Sarah's past and discovered that she had been struggling with mental health issues for years. The stress from the divorce proceedings seemed to have triggered a rapid deterioration in her condition. Sarah had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Mark said with a shaking voice. But she refused treatment. Analyzing Sarah's behavior patterns confirmed that she was regularly visiting the warehouse in the suburbs. So, we decided to carefully monitor that location. One day, right after Sarah left the warehouse, we got a chance to peek inside. What we saw left us speechless. The walls were covered with countless photos, all of Aiden. However, many of them were taken after Aiden's disappearance. "No way." Mark's face turned pale. Further investigation revealed that Sarah had staged Aiden's kidnapping and had been hiding him. Her diary contained entries detailing her desire for revenge against Mark and a distorted love for Aiden. "Only I can understand Aiden. Mark doesn't deserve to raise him." Such words were scrawled in messy handwriting. We also solved the mystery of how Aiden had managed to contact me. Sarah had given him a tablet for his education. However, escaping her surveillance, Aiden had managed to send me a message asking for help. He remembered me as the only adult he could trust, which is why he reached out to me. "Aiden, he was really alive all this time," Mark said, tears flowing. However, we had no time to dwell on our joy. Aiden was still under Sarah's control, and her mental state was unstable. We needed to rescue him as soon as possible. "We should report this to the police," John said with a stern expression. "But we need to proceed carefully. We don't know what Sarah might do." We nodded. Aiden's safety was the top priority. We prepared to submit all the evidence we had gathered to the police. Aiden, we're coming soon, I whispered in my heart. We'll definitely save you. After thorough discussions with the police, the day of the rescue operation arrived. Early in the morning, a police team including a special unit set out for the warehouse. Mark and I were to wait at a location a bit further away. Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison, the detective in charge, called out to us. Please wait here until we secure the area. As tension mounted, police vehicles approached the warehouse one after another. My heart was pounding fiercely. Suddenly, sirens blared, and police officers rushed into the warehouse all at once. Police! Don't move! Right after that voice, a scream echoed. It was Sarah's voice. Let go. Aiden is my child. A few minutes later, officers emerged from the warehouse. And among them, Aiden. Mark cried out. Although he looked thin and his expression was filled with fear, it was undoubtedly our Aiden. He was being carried by an officer, and when he saw us, tears began to flow. Grandma. Dad. We ran over and embraced Aiden. After 5 years apart, we were at a loss for words. Behind us, we could see Sarah being taken away by the police. Her eyes were vacant, as if she didn't understand the reality of the situation. Sarah will undergo a psychiatric evaluation, the detective explained. Legal measures will be taken, considering her condition. Aiden was trembling in our arms. Can we go home now? Yes, everything's all right now, I answered gently. Let's go home. As the ambulance took Aiden to the hospital, Mark and I held his hand the whole time. It felt like we had finally seen light after passing through a long, dark tunnel. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we vowed to overcome it together as a family. With that promise, we prepared to begin a new chapter. Several months have passed since Aiden's rescue. Following a psychiatric evaluation, Sarah was diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder and sentenced to treatment in a psychiatric hospital rather than prison. Her motive was revealed to be a combination of revenge against Mark and a distorted maternal love that led her to want to possess Aiden exclusively. The trial revealed that Sarah had been raising Aiden as a special child and selling his images on the internet. Aiden explained how he was able to contact me. Sarah had given him a tablet for online learning, but her monitoring wasn't perfect. Aiden remembered me as the only adult he could trust and sent the message when he found an opportunity. Aiden's road to recovery after returning home was challenging. He often woke up from nightmares and was afraid of contact with others. However, Carol and Mark patiently stood by Aiden's side. With the help of professional counseling, he gradually began to regain his daily life. One day, when Aiden showed a small smile, we felt hope. The family bond, though damaged, was surely being repaired. A long journey still lies ahead, but we will overcome it together. For Aiden's future. 1 year after Aiden's rescue, we were celebrating his 14th birthday. The table was set with a homemade cake, and colorful balloons decorated the room. Aiden's eyes, while still holding shadows of past fears, now shone with hope. Grandma, Dad, thank you, Aiden's voice mixed gratitude and strength. Sarah was under strict treatment, never to threaten us again. Aiden was bravely facing his trauma, attending counseling sessions and walking the path to recovery. And on this day, he announced a big decision to us. I want to start volunteering for the foster care system. I want to help kids like me. At those words, Mark and I couldn't help but tear up. Aiden, who had experienced such hardship, was now trying to use that experience to help others. It was proof that he had found true healing. Aiden, we're so proud of you. I hugged my grandson tightly. Our bond, having overcome adversity, had grown even stronger. This was the true victory. As I gazed at Aiden's smile, I thought from the bottom of my heart, our new life begins here. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 35 years old and work as an accountant. They say life is unpredictable, and that couldn't be truer for my life. 5 years ago, I had a fateful encounter at a local coffee shop. That day, my usual spot was taken, so I reluctantly sat next to a stranger. He struck up a conversation, saying, "The latte here is simply divine." That was the beginning. The man's name was Mark Miller. At 37, he was a successful architect. I was immediately drawn to his gentle nature and intellectual charm. Mark proposed to me by quoting a line from a movie, "You had me at hello." It was as romantic as could be. Our wedding was small but heartwarming. Newlywed life was smooth sailing, with both our careers on track and happiness abounding. Then, in our second year of marriage, we received surprising news. I was pregnant. Mark and I were overcome with joy, tears streaming down our faces. What a blessing to be given a new life, Mark said excitedly. Though there were anxieties during the pregnancy, Mark's support helped me through it all. Then came the long-awaited day of delivery. The labor pains were more intense than I'd imagined, but the moment Emily was born, it was all worth it. When I held her tiny hand, I vowed to protect her and make her happy. Emily's birth changed our lives dramatically. Nighttime feedings, diaper changes, sleepless nights. But every time we saw Emily's smile, all the fatigue just melted away. Hey, Mark. Don't Emily's fingers look just like ours? They sure do. She'll grow up to be as beautiful as you, no doubt. With such conversations, we gradually shaped our new family dynamic. Emily's growth brought us new joys every day. Her first rollover, her first word, her first steps. Each moment felt like a small miracle, and we carefully recorded every precious milestone. Sarah, you're an amazing mother, Mark would often say. Those words warmed my heart when I was exhausted. Little did we know that this happy event would soon bring a great trial to our family. 3 months after Emily's birth, my maternity leave was coming to an end. Should I return to work or dedicate myself to childcare? This decision would lead to unforeseen consequences that I couldn't have imagined at the time. I had a strong desire to return to work. I didn't want to give up my career as an accountant, and honestly, we needed my income. Mark's salary alone wouldn't cover the costs of raising Emily. But when I thought about Emily, my heart ached. Was it okay to leave a 3-month-old baby with someone else? Wouldn't she miss me? Such worries kept crossing my mind. After much deliberation, I discussed it with Mark. Sarah, your work is important. We'll figure it out together, Mark said, giving me a bit of courage. In the end, I decided to return to work. However, I started with part-time, 4 days a week, instead of full-time. Fortunately, my company was understanding and accepted this proposal. But a new problem arose. We needed to find someone to take care of Emily. We couldn't find a daycare that would accept a 3-month-old baby, and hiring a babysitter was too expensive. That's when Mark made a suggestion. What about asking my mother? Honestly, I was hesitant at first. I didn't have a particularly close relationship with my mother-in-law, Judith. But with no other options, we decided to ask Judith. She had recently retired and had time on her hands. When we explained the situation over the phone, Judith surprisingly agreed readily. Taking care of my granddaughter. There's nothing that could make me happier, Judith said, which put me a bit at ease. However, I still felt a nagging worry. I wondered if Judith could really take proper care of Emily. Judith arrived at our house a week before I was to return to work. At 62, Judith was petite but exuded an air of authority. Her graying hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore crisply ironed clothes. Please take care of her, Judith, I said, to which she smiled thinly and replied, Oh, Sarah. No need for such formalities. Call me Mom. I felt a bit uneasy at her words but decided to comply for the sake of keeping the peace. Judith immediately began inspecting every corner of the house. This should be done this way, that should be placed there for efficiency, she kept giving instructions. She also had many opinions about our childcare methods. You're changing diapers wrong, the feeding intervals are off, you're too soft on putting her to sleep. Each of Judith's words chipped away at my confidence. Mark would say, "Mom is experienced, she must be saying these things with good intentions," but to me, it all sounded like criticism. Still, Judith's help was essential for me to return to work. I decided to grit my teeth and bear it. The day before I returned to work, I gave Judith detailed instructions. The location of Emily's favorite stuffed animal, her preferred toys, her habits and preferences. Judith listened silently, but in the end, she said, "Don't worry, I've got this. Leave it to me." That night, I confided my worries to Mark. "Is Judith really okay? Will she take proper care of Emily?" Mark hugged my shoulders and encouraged me, "It'll be fine. Mom can be strict, but she always puts children first. Let's trust her." The next morning, I left the house with heavy steps. Looking back, I saw Judith holding Emily at the entrance. "Have a good day." "Don't worry," Judith said, which reassured me a little. However, I had no idea how the new days ahead would affect our family. After a few weeks of returning to work, I was beginning to understand more about Judith's personality and background. From conversations with Mark and Judith's casual comments, I started to see glimpses of her life story. Judith was born in the 1960s to a strict military father and a stay-at-home mother. She grew up in a rigid household environment. It was a family where suppressing emotional expression and valuing discipline were considered virtues. I realized that this background greatly influenced Judith's childcare approach. She emphasized strict schedules and didn't immediately respond to Emily's cries. "Let her cry. You mustn't spoil her," she would say. Emily also seemed to be struggling with Judith's presence. Usually not shy around people, Emily would often burst into tears in front of Judith. After a few weeks, subtle changes began to appear in Emily's behavior. She used to smile happily when she saw my face in the morning, but recently she had become expressionless. She also cried more at night and had trouble falling asleep. Noticing these changes, I became increasingly anxious and conflicted. Is something wrong with Emily? Is there a problem with Judith's childcare methods? Such questions kept crossing my mind. Even when I consulted Mark, he would only say, "Let's trust Mom." I started to get irritated with Mark for not understanding my concerns. "Mark, something's wrong with Emily. Don't you think there might be a problem with how Judith is raising her? Sarah, Mom is experienced. Don't you think you're just being oversensitive?" As we repeated such conversations, tension began to build in our marriage. One Friday evening, I returned home earlier than usual from work. When I arrived, an eerie silence hung over the house. There was no response when I called out, "Emily." "Judith." Driven by anxiety, I searched the house and heard a faint noise coming from the bedroom. When I opened the door, the sight before me made my blood run cold. Emily was lying in her crib, but her body was tightly wrapped in soft towels. She was screaming, her face bright red. And Judith was sitting on the sofa, watching TV. "What on earth are you doing?" I cried out. Judith, showing no sign of distress, said, "This is the most efficient way. I can rest, and Emily is safe." I immediately picked up Emily and untied the towels binding her. When I checked Emily's body, I found light bruises on her arms and legs. Probably marks from being tied up. "Why would you do such a thing?" I confronted Judith, and she calmly replied, "You're too lenient. Discipline is necessary." At that moment, Emily's body suddenly stiffened, and she began to convulse. Her pupils rolled upward, and her breathing became shallow. "Emily! Emily!" I desperately called my daughter's name. But Emily didn't respond. In a panic, I dialed 911. "It's an emergency. My 3-month-old daughter is having a seizure. Her breathing. While following the operator's instructions, I continued to hold Emily tightly. When we heard the ambulance sirens, Judith was still sitting on the sofa. "You're overreacting, Sarah. This is how we raised children in my day," Judith muttered. Looking at her, I realized she truly didn't understand. The paramedics arrived and quickly put Emily on a stretcher. I got into the ambulance with her, but the fear and anxiety I felt at that moment are indescribable. Watching Emily's tiny body continue to convulse, I headed to the hospital with a prayerful heart. The hospital emergency room was in chaos. Emily was immediately taken to the treatment room, and I waited in the waiting room, trembling with anxiety. Mark arrived 30 minutes later. "Sarah, what's going on?" Mark rushed over, out of breath. I explained the situation through tears. I could see Mark's face contort with anger and fear. An hour later, the doctor came to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, we need to talk," he said, and we were led to a small consultation room. "Your daughter's condition has stabilized," the doctor began. For a moment, I felt relieved, but the doctor's expression remained grave. "However, our detailed examination shows the possibility of serious brain damage." The moment I heard those words, I felt my world crumbling. I could feel Mark squeezing my hand tightly, but all other sensations seemed to have gone numb. The doctor continued, "We've also found signs of long-term abuse. Do you have any idea about this?" We were at a loss for words. We hesitated whether to talk about Judith but decided to reveal everything. The doctor listened with a serious expression and said, "We'll need to contact Child Protective Services." Just then, we heard a commotion in the hallway. When we opened the door, we saw Judith surrounded by nurses. "I have the right to see my granddaughter," she was shouting. Glaring at the doctor, Judith cried out, "I've done nothing wrong." When Mark tried to intervene, Judith lashed out, "This happened because you spoil her too much." Security was called, and Judith was removed from the hospital. However, the chaos left deep scars on our hearts. Emily's future, our family bonds, and our marriage, everything was suddenly called into question. Several weeks have passed since Emily was discharged from the hospital. Life at home has been more challenging than we imagined. Emily's condition was completely different from before, requiring daily care and rehabilitation. Mark and I were exhausted every day, juggling work and therapy. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, we sat facing each other in the living room. Fatigue was evident in Mark's eyes. "Sarah, we can't go on like this. We need to make a decision," he began. I agreed. "But what should we do?" I asked, and Mark let out a deep sigh. "In my opinion, we have two options. One is to sue my mother. The other is..." He hesitated. "The other is..." I prompted, and Mark continued painfully, "to try to reconcile as a family." Those words filled me with intense anger. Reconcile? After what she did to our child, that's absolutely impossible. Mark quietly replied, "I know, Sarah. But Mom had her own issues. Considering her upbringing and past traumas." "That's no excuse," I interrupted. "Emily's future has been ruined." Silence fell. After a while, Mark spoke up. "Sarah, our relationship is in danger too. I feel like I can't handle this stress anymore." Those words brought me back to reality. Indeed, over the past few weeks, we had been blaming each other and arguing more often. "So, what should we do?" I asked in a small voice. Mark took my hand. "First, let's get counseling for ourselves. Then, let's make the best decision for Emily. Whether we take legal action or try to reconcile, let's decide together." That night, we talked for a long time. About Emily's future, our family bonds, and our own relationship. By the time the sun rose, we had finally reached a conclusion. We agreed on the point that we must prioritize Emily's future. For that, we must first become strong ourselves. A month after we started counseling, we decided to meet with a lawyer. We felt legal action was necessary to protect Emily's future and prevent similar tragedies. In the lawyer's office, we explained the whole story. The female lawyer listened intently, occasionally taking notes. When we finished explaining, she quietly began to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, this is clearly a serious case of child abuse. Legally, criminal charges are possible." At those words, Mark's face contorted. I held his hand. No matter how painful the decision, we understood it was necessary for Emily. The lawyer continued, "However, since this is also a family matter, I recommend trying mediation first. If that doesn't resolve the issue, we'll move to court proceedings." We looked at each other and nodded. "Let's start with mediation," Mark said. The following week, a family meeting including Judith was scheduled. In a tense atmosphere, Judith appeared with her lawyer. The meeting was extremely difficult. At first, Judith tried to justify her actions, but as she faced the evidence, her attitude gradually changed. "I might have been wrong," Judith muttered, and the room fell silent. After that, it was discussed that Judith would receive professional psychological counseling, contact with Emily would only be allowed under supervision for the time being. Judith would bear part of Emily's medical expenses and future care costs, and the whole family would participate in regular therapy sessions. We reached an agreement on these points. A legal settlement was reached and approved by the court. However, this was just the beginning. Emily was receiving rehabilitation at the pediatric neurology department 3 times a week. The schedule was hectic, with speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. Emily showed gradual progress and slowly began to speak words. Mark and I were busy balancing work and rehabilitation. Fortunately, both our workplaces were understanding and allowed us to work flexible hours. Still, the accumulation of fatigue was unavoidable. Family therapy sessions also continued regularly. At first, the atmosphere was awkward, but as we repeated the sessions, we began to understand each other's feelings better. The change in Judith afterward was also significant. She earnestly engaged in counseling and faced her past. "Now I understand how terrible my actions were," she said tearfully. Mark had a complex expression on his face as he watched her. I myself was struggling with feelings of self-blame. The thought, if only I had noticed earlier, would occasionally overwhelm me. The counselor repeatedly told me, "You are a victim, not a perpetrator," but it took time for me to fully accept those words. My relationship with Mark also deepened through this experience. By acknowledging each other's weaknesses and supporting each other, our bond became stronger than before. We also started participating in a local support group. Interaction with families who had similar experiences was a great encouragement. The thought, "We're not alone," gave us strength. By the time Emily celebrated her 2nd birthday, she was showing recovery beyond the doctor's expectations. There were still many challenges ahead, but it was certain that a ray of hope had appeared. This journey may never end. However, as we move forward step by step, we have rediscovered our strength as a family. Emily's 5th birthday. Colorful balloons dance in the garden, and laughter fills the air. Emily is chatting happily with her friends. Thanks to speech therapy, her words have become fluent. She still has some difficulties, but she moves around controlling her wheelchair by herself. Her eyes are full of intelligence, keenly observing her surroundings. Mark and I reflected on the past few years. It had been a series of challenges, but also filled with many surprises and joys. Judith is also participating in today's celebration. Seeing her, we realize that people can change. We feel relieved to see her interacting carefully but lovingly with her granddaughter. Life is unpredictable, but that's what makes it beautiful. Judith's words resonate in our hearts. Mark's siblings have also joined the celebration as family members. The former conflicts have now turned into strong bonds. Our marital relationship has also deepened through this experience. Overcoming difficulties has strengthened our trust and love for each other. Emily's growth has taught us many things. Despite her disability, she is blossoming with her own unique talents. She has a gift for writing poetry and is skilled at operating computers. We have started volunteering at local support groups, using our experience to help others. By supporting families in similar situations, we found healing for ourselves as well. I'm glad to be part of this family. Emily whispered these words before blowing out her birthday candles. We couldn't help but tear up at her words. Indeed, our life has taken an unexpected turn. But what we've gained through this journey is immeasurable. The strength of family bonds, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of hope. These give us the strength to overcome any difficulty. The future is still uncertain. But now we have a conviction. No matter what challenges await us, this family can overcome them. Believing this, we continue to move forward. Looking at Emily's smile, I quietly made a vow. Let's cherish each